Marvel's master of multiversal magic. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination, so don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author. We are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like, and if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 601, Facing the Black Dragon. Fairy Tail has now become the most powerful mage guild on the continent of Ishgir. It has gathered a large number of skilled mages and maintains excellent relations with the Alvarez Empire of the Western continent. Therefore, even the Magic Council doesn't dare to interfere with the guild. At most, they send out written complaints. If George ignores them, the Magic Council won't send supervisory forces to forcibly punish Fairy Tail as before. However, since it was a mistake made by a guild mage, he's not unreasonable and usually has the guild's few mages who have learned repair magic deal with it as soon as possible. Originally, he thought that by bringing Fairy Tail to the position of the world's strongest guild, he, as guild leader, could sit in the guild and collect all sorts of magic books. But in reality, due to his discussions with Zareth and Mavis, and the collection of magic from the entire Western continent, he has essentially acquired 90% of the world's magic. The magic that the guild's mages have brought him that he hasn't mastered is extremely limited. On the contrary, the guild was rife with miscellaneous affairs. With Natsu, Gray, and Urza, typical Fairy Tail mages, as role models, the new mages who joined the guild afterward were all just as capable. Their strength improved rapidly, but so did the amount of trouble they caused. He was already considering returning the guild master position to the old master, Makarov, after devouring the Black Dragon. Restored to its original state, teleporting to Galifa City, George instantly restored half of the destroyed city to its original state with a single restoration spell. However, he didn't immediately return to the guild. Instead, he cast a location finding spell. Direction Manifestation, Altair. If you were to hand over the guild master position to the old master, he needed to find someone capable of handling logistical matters. Otherwise, if something went wrong, the old master would still rush to him. Don't worry, the old master was capable of doing this without any embarrassment. The few mages in the guild who currently study repair spells are only good at repairing small items. Anything slightly larger is beyond their capabilities. Therefore, he had a very suitable candidate, Altair, a former Devil Heart mage, born with immense magical power, and the inheritor of the lost magic Arc of Time. Although Altair doesn't use repair spells, they are essentially a type of time magic and can achieve similar effects. If Altair were to learn his repair spells, while she wouldn't be as powerful, it would be sufficient. Even if Natsu and his friends caused trouble, they couldn't possibly sink the entire continent. Found her, following the golden arrow and using his mental scan, George quickly found Altair in the southernmost part of the eastern continent. At this moment, Altair, along with her adopted daughter Melty, was attacking a relatively unknown dark magic guild. Since the Tenrau Island battle, Altair and Melty had resolved their inner conflicts, broken free from Devil Heart, and, to atone for their past mistakes, began fighting evil throughout the world. Radiant Light, Altair conjured various crystal balls from the future, instantly releasing countless rays of light that knocked down dozens of dark mages in front of her. Sin Ray, Melty unleashed her sinful love magic, eliminating the remaining dark mages. At that moment, George landed from the sky. There's still someone else. Altair and Melty mistakenly thought George was also a mage from the Dark Guild and simultaneously launched another spell at him. However, this time, their magic had no effect. George waved his hand, displaying his key source flow ability, which directly nullified the magic. Don't get excited, I'm not a mage from this guild, I'm George, the guild master of Fairy Tail. Seeing the two's drastic change in expression and their impending use of stronger magic, George revealed his identity and reverted to his cat form. It really is you. Altair had once infiltrated the Magic Council and had seen George when he was in charge of repairing Clover town, so she recognized George's cat form. However, she didn't understand why George, the current guild master of the strongest guild on the continent and the continent's #1 mage, would be here. George didn't waste any words and directly stated his purpose. I'm here specifically to find you and invite you to join our Fairy Tail Guild. Invite us. Altair and Melty were both stunned for a moment, but quickly shook their heads. Respected Guild Master, Gray has already told you about our situation. We really want to become mages of a legitimate guild and atone for our sins openly. However, the Magic Council is still after us, and joining Fairy Tail would only bring trouble to the guild. Thank you, don't worry about the Magic Council, I'll handle it. As long as you're willing, you can join Fairy Tail and do missions openly to deal with those Dark Guild mages. George waved his cat paw, assuring the two. Altier and Melty did have a criminal record with the Magic Council, but it wasn't anything heinous. Besides, the first Magic Council had long since ceased to exist. With his current influence, he only needed to ask, and the members of the Magic Council would give him face. Under his persuasion, Altier and Melty finally accepted his invitation and returned to the Fairy Tail Guild with him. Having settled everything, George left the guild quietly without telling anyone, embarking on his journey to fight the Black Dragon. The main reason he didn't tell anyone was that in this battle, no one else could really help. The Black Dragon's devouring magic would render everyone else's magic ineffective, even Zareth. Helping would only hinder them. It was better for him to handle it alone. Of course, most importantly, he had absolute confidence in his current strength. If he were to fight the Grim Reaper Anxirum of this world, he might not be so confident. According to the records of various ancient magic materials he had collected, Anxirum might not be just a simple Grim Reaper, he could very well be the creator of this entire world. It's just that he occasionally appears to take the life and death of mortals and cast curses, which is why he is mistaken for merely a god of death. Fairy Tail has several parallel worlds, each with well-developed laws, countless mages and magical creatures, and even a celestial spirit world. Theoretically, this death god might have already reached a multiverse level standard. Even the lowest level is stronger than the peak of a single universe. As for the Black Dragon, he's at most at the peak of the individual Skyfather level, and that peak is only due to his devouring magic, a powerful weapon. Therefore, it's not a big problem for him. Chapter 602 The Gates of the Underworld. Isn't this the Magic Council? Following the guidance of his location finding magic, George discovered that the Black Dragon was currently in the city where the Magic Council headquarters was located. Previously, when he located the Black Dragon, its location was usually a deserted island in the ocean, where the Black Dragon slept. The Black Dragon had lived for so many years, only occasionally appearing when sensing dragon power. Most of its time it was asleep. Now that the Black Dragon wasn't in that location, it meant it had become active again. Could it be because of Natsu and the others? George's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly remembered that Mira Jane had mentioned when he left the guild that Natsu, Urza, and the others had accepted an S-rank mission issued by a member of the Magic Council. The mission objective seemed to be to defeat a demon hidden within the council. At the time, he hadn't paid much attention. Most of the demons in this world were created by Zareth, and their strength was indeed terrifying for ordinary mages. But for Natsu and the others, it wasn't too difficult. Besides the numerous missions they had taken on recently, resulting in a significant breakthrough in their strength, they also had the various magical items provided by Zareth. However, it now seems that the demons that appear this time are quite powerful, and there might be more than one. The battle was so intense that it awakened the sleeping Black Dragon. Half an hour ago, at the Magic Council headquarters, a violent explosion resounded through the sky, almost completely destroying the entire Magic Council headquarters. The town's residents fled the town immediately upon discovering the destruction of the council, while the troops guarding the Magic Council were now all lying on the ground. Fairy Tail, humph, nothing special. Hades Mardogil looked at Urza, Natsu, Gray, Lucy, and Wendy, who were standing panting in the ruins, his face full of disdain. Around him stood 9 mages with terrifying magical power, or more accurately, demons. That's right, they were the last, most mysterious, and most powerful Dark Guild in the Balam Alliance, Tartars. Of the 10 members of Tartarus, apart from Silver, who was controlled by necromancy, the other 9 were all demons created by Zareth. The plan to attack the Magic Council was to obtain the key to activate the Magic Pulse Bomb, FIS. FIS, an ancient white legacy, is scattered throughout the eastern continent and, like the magic spirit power, is one of the Council's most powerful weapons. Once activated, it can forcibly dissipate the magic power across the eastern continent. The purpose of this was to resurrect End, the most powerful fire demon in Zareth's Devil Book, thereby killing Zareth. Their creation by Zareth was solely for the purpose of killing him. Unfortunately, halfway through the plan, a fairy tale mage invited by one of the council members intervened, forcing them to resort to force instead of operating covertly. Fortunately, They eventually obtained the key to activate Phys. Once they dealt with these fairy tale mages, they could successfully activate Phys and complete their plan. Shameless meow. If you have the guts, don't destroy our teleportation device. Happy, standing atop Natsu's head, brandished his weapon, fish-dried fish, and yelled at Hades. Lucy waved her hand and complained, "They're just afraid we'll use the teleportation device to call our guildmates for help. And now they have the nerve to say that? What kind of Hades is he? A coward. If the demons of Tartarus hadn't secretly destroyed the key to the gate, they would have already activated the teleportation and called their guildmates for help. They wouldn't be being ganged up on like this now. There were only 5 of them, while the other side had 10. Even with only 5 of them fighting one-on-one, it was already very difficult. If all 10 of them attacked together, they would probably have already lost. That's enough fun, time to end this. Hades raised an eyebrow upon hearing this, but didn't say much. He simply ordered his 9 subordinates, Friendmers, go activate Phys. The rest of you, attack together and kill them all for me. He had been somewhat wary of the original Fairy Tale Guild, but not afraid of them. But the current Fairy Tale Guild was different. It was filled with many of the top mages from the Eastern Continent, and Guildmaster George's strength was unfathomable. Even he wasn't confident he could defeat him. Therefore, to avoid the plan's failure, upon discovering Fairy Tale's interference, he immediately destroyed their unique teleportation magic item. He had been observing Fairy Tale's growth and gathering intelligence on them for years. Yes, hearing their leader's command, these arrogant demons immediately joined forces to attack Urza, Natsu, and their companions. After several years of growth, Urza and Natsu's strength had greatly improved, and even Lucy had collected all 12 golden keys, entering the ranks of S-class mages. Furthermore, they carried magic items specially made for them by George, enhanced magical armor, and weapons, making them among the strongest in the Eastern Continent. Unfortunately, they weren't facing just one demon, but a combined attack from 8. These demons, besides their physical strength, used unique demonic spells, the effects of which were generally bizarre and powerful. Like the demon Saraya Tenkyoka, who can strip enemies of their 5 senses, amplify their pain, and infinitely strengthen his own body, and the demon Tralha of the Dark, who can release highly poisonous black water to cover enemies, and whose body is indestructible, and the demon Suzatsuki Tensira, who can use command spells to command all humans, rendering their bodies incapable of self-care and forcing them to obey his commands involuntarily. Each of these 8 demons was created by Xerath in an attempt to kill himself. After a fierce battle, the 5 Fairy Tale members were quickly severely injured. Just as Phys was about to activate his attack and the 5 were about to be killed, a bolt of lightning struck, and 4 of them made a dazzling appearance. It turned out to be Laxus and the Thunder God clan, who had been on a mission nearby, arriving. Actually, the initial explosion of the battle hadn't been enough to completely obliterate the Magic Council. It was Natsu's deliberate act during the battle. His aim was to attract the help of his guildmates on missions nearby through the powerful explosion and the spread of magical energy. He remembered that many of his guildmates were on missions in the nearby town. Not only Lachesis and the Thunder Gods, but Gagiel, Juvia, and others soon arrived and joined the battle. The scales of victory tipped again until Hades himself intervened, regaining control. Just as the battle reached its climax, with a fest bomb less than 5 minutes from detonation, the terrifying black dragon Necrogia descended. Chapter 603. You can be immune to magic, and so can I. This magic power, it really is. Sensing the unique magic power of the black dragon emanating from afar, George knew he hadn't guessed wrong. He instantly teleported to the location where the magic power appeared. Even the Fire Dragon King has been forced out. Appearing above the ruins of the Magic Council headquarters, George took in everything happening nearby. At this moment, the Fire Dragon King had emerged from Natsu's body and was fighting the Black Dragon one-on-one, but it was clearly no match for him. Below, Natsu and the others were also fighting together against 9 demons. Good, after swallowing the Black Dragon, I can collect these demons and give them to Mira Jane. That way, her absorption magic will have more variety. George scratched his whiskers with his catpaw, no longer hiding his magic power, and released his terrifying pressure. Compared to before, this enormous magic power, several times stronger, was fully displayed in this world for the first time. The terrifying surge of magic power immediately caused the entire world to change. Lightning flashed and thunder roared, dark clouds covered the sky, and a gale swept across the land, even blocking the sunlight for thousands of meters. To the uninitiated, it would have looked like the end of the world. The overwhelming magical power and the sheer scale of the scene naturally drew the attention of everyone present, causing them to immediately cease their battle. The Fire Dragon King and Natsu, along with the other fairy tale mages, retreated to one side, while the 9 demons of Tartarus moved to the other. Even the most powerful black dragon in the sky transformed into human form, a rare occurrence. Guildmaster. The Guildmaster is here, the fairy tale mages exclaimed excitedly upon seeing George. They knew that with their Guildmaster present, neither the demons nor the black dragon were a problem. This was their unwavering trust in their Guildmaster's strength. Meanwhile, on the Tartarus side, Hades, sensing the magical power emanating from George, his pupils constricted, his face filled with disbelief. He knew the fairy tale Guildmaster was strong, but his confidence still led him to believe that even the strongest couldn't surpass him. However, reality slapped him in the face. Now, he felt like an ant before an elephant. They were simply on different levels. Run. At this moment, only one thought occupied his mind. Driven by survival instinct, he immediately fled in the opposite direction at top speed. The other demons hesitated for a moment, then quickly followed. They too had sensed the difference in strength. No matter how strange or powerful their spells were, they were ineffective against such a disparity in magical power. How could they be so strong? Even if N were resurrected, even if Zeref were alive, they couldn't be this powerful. Freeze. Seeing the 9 demons trying to escape, George's gaze sharpened, and time in the entire city instantly froze. The 9 demons at the gates of Tartarus were also frozen in time, unable to move. Seal. He reached out and pulled out a card, throwing it at the 9 demons frozen in time. A powerful sealing array rose from the card, instantly absorbing the 9 demons into it. Card sealing technique. This was a new type of sealing magic that George had created by combining the card space magic of this world's view with elements of the nested doll sealing technique from the Mage Apprentice world and sealing magic from the magic card world. By simply trapping the enemy for a moment, he could seal them within the card, and even if the enemy was stronger than him, they wouldn't be able to break free easily. Unless the enemy was also proficient in sealing magic. The strength of the 9 demons was far inferior to his. Even Hades' magic power was as insignificant as dust compared to him, making it impossible for them to break free. Your cat. I seem to have seen it before. The black dragon Akurogio looked at George easily sealing the 9 demons, a look of doubt in his eyes. Time magic had no effect on him, but the magic power displayed by this cat was unbelievable. Even his own magic power was far inferior to this cat's. However, during the Dragon King festival, he had devoured almost all the dragons, mastering the devouring magic, which allowed him to ignore any magic. No matter how strong the opponent's magic power or how powerful their spells, he wasn't afraid. What puzzled him was that he seemed to have seen this cat in his memory, but he couldn't recall where. After all, a cat with such powerful magic power couldn't be forgotten. George turned to the black dragon, dispelling his time magic and laughing. Yes, we did meet briefly in the northern continent, but back then I wasn't good enough for you. Years ago, when he went to the northern continent to learn Dragon Slayer magic and was searching for Gilderts, he witnessed a battle between Gilderts and the Black Dragon. He was utterly shocked by the Black Dragon's strength. Gilderts' full force attack hadn't harmed the Black Dragon at all, while the Black Dragon's casual strike had cost Gilderts a leg. He was stronger than Gilderts then, but definitely no match for the Black Dragon. But now it was different. He was confident he could completely crush the Black Dragon. You're just as bad enough for me now. I'm going to kill this dragon and all these Dragon Slayer mages. If you don't interfere, I'm in a good mood today and won't kill you. If you dare to interfere, then I'll kill you too. The Black Dragon stared at George, his tone filled with contempt for all life. George chuckled upon hearing this. Actually, I came here to find you today, but I just happened to run into you causing trouble for my guild's mages. Find me. The Black Dragon's eyes narrowed. George pointed his cat paw at the Black Dragon. Yes, I'm looking for you. I plan to finish you off today, you menace. So, do you think I'll get in your way? I think you're courting death. I'll destroy you first, then those Dragon Slayer mages and the dragons, and finally the entire world. I'll turn this world into complete ruins. The Black Dragon transformed back into its dragon form, opening its mouth to bite George. Black Dragon's roar. A black energy with immense destructive power erupted from the Black Dragon's mouth, directly engulfing George. Because of the immense magical power George displayed, the black dragon showed no mercy. This roar was delivered with full force. Compared to the playful attack on Tenrao Island, this full-force attack was at least 100 times more powerful. If it hit the ground, it could easily reduce the size of the eastern continent. However, George showed no panic whatsoever in the face of such a terrifying attack. A surge of white energy emanated from his body, his eyes gleamed, and he pointed at the incoming black energy pillar. Key source flow, disperse. The moment the white energy touched the black, destructive energy pillar, it immediately collapsed and began to slowly dissipate into the air. Not only are you immune to magic, but I am too. Chapter 604 The Little Black Dragon, how laughable. What? Seeing that his full force roar had no effect, the black dragon's expression finally changed. The devouring magic, which he had honed by slaughtering so many dragons, was his greatest trump card. No matter how powerful a mage was, even someone like Zareth, no matter how powerful their magic, they couldn't harm him. Not only could he fight with the superhuman physique of a dragon, but he could also unleash powerful dragon magic at will. Now, he had actually encountered a cat mage who could nullify magic in the same way. So what? Even if my magic is useless against you, I can still crush your tiny body into mincemeat. After trying to roar a few more times and finding that magic was completely ineffective against George, the black dragon flew directly at George in its true form, its sharp dragon claws slashing fiercely at him. In its eyes, George's tiny cat body probably couldn't even withstand a single claw strike. However, the reality was clearly not so. My cat claws aren't to be trifled with either. Seeing the huge dragon claws coming at him, George's body rapidly expanded, and he directly met the attack with a cat claw. With the enhancement from so many clones, plus the numerous things he'd consumed using the 6 treasures Immortal Thief during this time, even in his cat form, his physical strength was extraordinary. Cat claws versus dragon claws, 2 species on completely different levels clashed. Boom! A tremendous collision resounded through the sky, a shockwave nearly blasting everyone away. Guildmaster, the fairy tale mages below cried out in alarm. Ultimately, the cat claws were no match for the dragon claws, the dragon claws slicing off the entire white glove. A meerkat, even with giant magic, shouldn't have such physical strength. The black dragon, who had sliced off George's cat claw, flew in the air, his expression not one of joy, but rather one of shock and confusion. Indeed, he had gained the upper hand in the previous exchange. But only he knew that the process hadn't been easy. As the Black Dragon King who had slaughtered tens of thousands of dragons, his physical body was the strongest of all dragons, unmatched by any other species in the world. Yet, the collision between the dragon claws and the cat claws had put him under considerable pressure. Although he ultimately won, the cat's physical strength surprised him. It seemed comparable to the most powerful dragon kings he had fought years ago. This was just a cat. How could a cat's body be this powerful? Looks like relying solely on my cat body won't do. George wasn't bothered by having one of his paws severed, it was within his expectations. The Black Dragon King, who had slaughtered the entire dragon race, possessed undeniable physical strength. It was merely a test. No healing magic needed, no need to use dual hands or 6 treasures Immortal Thief. This minor injury was easily healed by the self-healing ability of the extinction virus he had been injected with long ago. In less than 5 seconds, the missing paw had grown back. Again, George raised his paw and beckoned to the black dragon. The black dragon roared in fury, "I'll smash your head open and see if you can recover, so what if you have self-healing abilities?" He'd smash your head open, or even tear your entire body to shreds and see if you could recover. For so many years, no living being, had ever dared to treat him with such an attitude. He was the dragon of destruction. The epitome of fear, the end of the world. Any creature that saw him should tremble in fear, should prostrate itself on the ground and let him destroy it. Reaching its maximum speed, the black dragon Akurogia shot towards George like a giant black arrow, its 2 claws aimed at George, intending to tear him apart. At this moment, George no longer concealed himself, letting out a roar and transforming directly from his cat form into his most powerful dragon form, his physical body greatly enhanced. Gigantification, with the giant magic of this world combined with the power of the magic card world, his dragon body instantly swelled to tens of thousands of meters in size. A mere black dragon, laughable, extending his enormous dragon claw, George swiftly grabbed the attacking black dragon, forcefully pressing it to the ground. The black dragon was less than 1,000 meters long, while George's current size was tens of thousands of meters. A single dragon claw already exceeded the black dragon's volume. Boom 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 boom, powerful force continued to be unleashed, pressing the black dragon deeper and deeper into the ground upon contact. The onlookers noticed a large crater expanding repeatedly, centered on George's dragon claw, solely due to the crushing force of physical power. It seemed the entire Earth was sinking. This was the terrifying physical strength of George's dragon body. Roar, George's body was powerful, but the black dragon Accurogias was no pushover either. Although not as large as George at this moment, and its power suppressed, it wasn't without resistance. It used all its strength to pry open George's claw, and with a roar, blasted a huge hole in the ground below, bursting out from behind George. It didn't give up so easily, launching an attack towards George's rear. It's not that easy after all. George wasn't discouraged by not being able to kill the black dragon immediately, but turned and continued to claw at it. Its current strength was greater than the black dragon's, but the difference wasn't as large as its size suggested. Such a huge size, yet such a fast reaction. The black dragon made a sharp turn, narrowly avoiding George's claw. As a massive black dragon, he faced enemies that were mostly smaller than himself, so he understood the inherent disadvantages of being large. First, there's the issue of vision. A large size means certain areas are invisible, such as the back of the head, the back of the back, under the wings, and the groin. Attacking from these blind spots greatly increases the chance of success before the opponent can react. Second, there's the slow reaction time. Large size doesn't equate to slow speed. With sufficient physical strength, size doesn't equate to speed. It's like a skilled person catching a fly with chopsticks. However, high speed doesn't equate to fast reaction time. Often, to a large creature, something tiny, if not in its line of sight, will instinctively slow its reaction by half a beat, even if it notices it. So, logically, by turning around from behind the opponent shouldn't have reacted so quickly and attacked him. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Having dodged George's attacks, the black dragon remained relentless, like a black mosquito, launching attacks from every angle, aiming for his vitals. But no matter the angle or position, George could detect and successfully intercept them, and counterattack. What the black dragon didn't know was that George's mental power had already covered an area of several kilometers, making him fully aware of the black dragon's attack movements. Chapter 605. No, what I want is Satan. Guildmaster, we're here to help you. Seeing George and the black dragon locked in fierce combat in midair, Natsa below was fired up again, immediately charging up on his father, the Fire Dragon King. Urza, Laxus, and the others were equally eager to follow. We are Fairy Tail. No matter how powerful the enemy, the Fairy Tail mages would never give up. Shouting about friendship, bonds, and justice, they charged forward. You're asking for death, Acrogia. The black dragon was frustrated by George's relentless attacks, unable to launch a successful sneak attack. Seeing that these little bugs dared to provoke him, he angrily turned his attention to Natsu and the others. I can't beat him, but I can beat you little bugs. He knew in his heart that he absolutely couldn't defeat this bizarre Dragon Slayer cat today. He decided to simply take down these few weak Dragon Slayer mages and the Fire Dragon King, then retreat and wait for a solution before engaging in a final battle. Looks like the game should end soon. Seeing the black dragon led the attack on Natsu and the others, George no longer held back and prepared to use his full strength. Currently, it seemed that both sides could ignore magic, and while his physical body, after transforming into a dragon, was stronger than the black dragon's, he couldn't completely overwhelm it. If the black dragon wanted to escape, he would have a hard time stopping it. Of course, this was only under the condition of fighting with only physical strength. Because he not only possessed immense individual power, but also a small world that was 80% complete. This was his true trump card. The difference in strength between an individual at the peak of the Heavenly Father level and a Heavenly Father level with his own small world, between an individual at the single universe level and a single universe level with his own complete universe, was still quite significant. Come in. George waved his hand, and a huge black rift appeared, rapidly spreading and swallowing the entire town and the black dragon, Natsu, and the others above it. George himself instantly disappeared from his spot, entering his own small world. I said, this world can't fly. Within the small world, his mouth opened, and the laws of the world immediately changed. The black dragon, which had been pouncing towards Natsu and the others, suddenly lost its ability to fly and crashed into the town. Where is this? How could this be? Raising its head from the town's ruins, the black dragon tried to flap its wings, but it couldn't take off no matter what it did. Turning its head to look around, it found itself in a vast, empty space, as if it were in an endless universe. This is impossible. No magic can work on this Dragon King. What's going on? It thought that George must have used some kind of magic to teleport space and suppress its ability to fly. But its devouring magic could absorb all magic that affected it, rendering it ineffective. It shouldn't be affected. So, it was somewhat confused. Because this is my world, and what I'm using isn't magic, but the power of the world's fundamental laws, George didn't waste any words with a black dragon, silently answering itself, and then descended from the sky to begin beating the black dragon. Unable to fly, the black dragon could only crawl on the ground, its movement speed greatly reduced, and it could no longer escape George. The devouring magic is powerful, but it can only be perfectly executed under the laws of the fairy tale world. This time, however, it's not in the fairy tale world, but in his own. Although this world is not yet perfect, he can still use the fundamental laws of the world he has constructed to suppress the black dragon's devouring magic. He can also use the power of these laws to impose various restrictions on the black dragon. Avada Kedavra, roar of the three-colored dragon, fairy law, sleep song, billion volts, sword control technique with magnetic control. Because of the suppression of the world's laws, the black dragon's devouring magic cannot be fully utilized, and George's magic once again comes into play. Although its power can only reach 1% of its usual strength, the physical suppression it provides makes the black dragon suffer greatly. Even more terrifying is that he had prepared a set of 12 dragon-slaying throwing knives, crafted using weapon refining techniques, in his small world beforehand. With his mutant abilities greatly enhanced, he uses magnetic force to propel the 12 dragon-slaying throwing knives, combined with the power of the magical artifacts themselves. Even the black dragon's tough hide cannot withstand the attack, and it is soon covered in wounds. The final blow, his body pinned the black dragon down, rendering it immobile. The 12 dragon-slaying blades merged into one, their magnetic force propelling them forward like a streak of light, piercing the black dragon's skull and instantly slaying it. 6 treasures immortal thief. The instant the black dragon was killed, George, amplified by the world's laws, unleashed the 6 treasures immortal thief, absorbing everything from the black dragon. Only after the black dragon was completely enveloped by ki, and its decomposition entered his body, did he revert to his cat form, leading the stunned Natsu and the others back to the outside world. Restored to its original state, a powerful restoration spell restored the ruined town to its original condition. George said to the still unresponsive Natsu and the others, "I need to go into seclusion for a while. The guild's affairs will temporarily be handled by the old guild master." Without waiting for a reply, he vanished. The black dragon had been completely absorbed by the 6 treasures immortal thief, but it would take time to fully digest it. This was a perfect opportunity to legitimately hand the guild back to the old guild master. A month later, George opened his eyes in his own little world, a satisfied expression on his face. He had completely devoured the black dragon's body, further enhancing his physical strength and allowing him to directly transform into the black dragon form. He had also digested the black dragon's soul using the spirit binding technique, acquiring the black dragon's unique devouring magic. With the aid of devouring magic, his speed of devouring chaos power and phoenix power in the main Marvel world doubled. Right, I haven't given these gifts to Mira Jane yet. Reaching out, he took out the card that sealed the 9 demons and returned to the outside world. It was late at night, and he didn't wait until dawn, teleporting directly to Mira Jane's bedroom in the guild castle. Suddenly awakened by a powerful surge of magic, Mira Jane instinctively used a receiving magic spell, transforming into Satan form. However, the next second, she was pounced on the bed. "It's me," George smiled. Transforming into human form. Seeing it was George, Mira Jane immediately breathed a sigh of relief and was about to deactivate her Satan form. However, George abruptly threw off the covers. "Don't turn back. I want Satan. You said it, don't regret it." Mira Jane, in her Satan form, was a quintessential domineering female demon, completely different from her usual gentle self, and extremely proactive. She hooked her tail around George, flipped him over, and pinned him beneath her. "I like being on top." Chapter 606 New World, Fate's Day Night. In Fuyuki City, in a large, retro-style courtyard, 17-year-old Shiraoi Miaya looked out the window at the lifeless red maple tree in the yard and sighed. It's a pity you're not an appliance, otherwise I could have used my abilities to fix you. This red maple tree was planted 10 years ago by his adoptive father, Kiritsugui Miaya, who had rescued him from a fire. Unfortunately, after his adoptive father died 5 years ago, the maple tree began to wither for unknown reasons. He tried many methods, but none were effective. Until today, the entire maple tree appeared to be nothing but a bare trunk, completely dead. He got up, did his daily exercise, and then dressed and came to the living room. I'm sorry, Sakura, for troubling you. In the kitchen, a beautiful girl with blue hair, wearing an apron, placed the last dish of miso soup on the table, a gentle smile on her face. Not at all, I came to help because I like it. This girl was neither his sister nor his younger sister. All his relatives had perished in the fire 10 years ago. The girl's name was Matao Sakura, a first-year student at the private Hamuratora Academy, and the younger sister of her former friend, Matao Shinji. After he and Matao Shinji had a falling out, she felt guilty that her brother had kicked her out of the archery club, so she often came to his house to help with chores. She was a very gentle and kind girl. Good morning, Fujimura-ne. After sitting down, Imiya Shirao greeted the short-haired woman holding a newspaper across from him. This woman wasn't his relative either. She was a friend he met after his adoptive father moved here, and after his adoptive father's death, she became his guardian. She was also his English teacher at school. Because she couldn't cook, she basically came to his house for meals every day, and her personality was quite unreliable. Good morning, Shirao. Fujimura Yamato bared her head in her newspaper and replied casually. As soon as Shirao Miaya spat out his first bite of food, he jumped up triumphantly and laughed loudly. See? You fell for it. I switched the labels on the sauce and soy sauce this morning to get revenge for yesterday. It's so early in the morning, and you're already 25. How can you still be like this? Shirao Miaya took a while to recover before helplessly covering his forehead. It was just an accidental nickname yesterday. Was it really worth holding a grudge until this morning? Indeed, his precocious maturity at such a young age was all thanks to these unreliable adults. And so, the three of them, laughing and joking, finished breakfast as usual and headed out to school one after another. Fujimura Yamato rode off first on his electric scooter, while Matao Sakura and Shirao Miaya, after washing the dishes and cleaning the kitchen, left together. However, just as he closed the door, Shirao Miaya glanced into the yard and couldn't help but pause in surprise. What's wrong, senpai? Matao Sakura asked with concern. Imiya Shirao locked the door and shook his head with a smile. Nothing, I must have been mistaken. Just now, he seemed to have seen the withered maple tree swaying from side to side, as if it were alive. But he quickly realized it was just the wind blowing through the tree, creating an illusion. However, not long after Imiya Shirao and Matao Sakura left, the withered maple tree began to revive at a visible speed. In just a few seconds, it returned to its most lush and vibrant state. Not only that, but upon closer inspection, one could discover that this maple tree, less than 5 meters tall, contained an extremely large amount of life force and magical power. What a surprise, it actually turned into a tree this time. A human face appeared on the maple tree's trunk and uttered a somewhat surprised voice. Indeed, this maple tree was none other than George, who had activated his new clone. A tree is fine, even a stone is the same to me now. He was somewhat surprised that his new clone was a tree, but not overly concerned. With his current mastery of magic, he could transform into human form regardless of what the new clone was. Besides, the slight boost from the new clone was negligible to him. Previously, having an extra human clone, even just an ordinary human, essentially doubled his physical abilities. Now, the physical strength of an extra human body was insignificant. What he valued most was the power system and magic of the new world, allowing him to better utilize its strengths and compensate for his weaknesses, enhancing the power of his own magic. It also allowed him to better refine his own small world. However, to be honest, having a tree clone in the early stages was far superior to having an ordinary human clone. After all, if a human possessed all the abilities of a tree, such as photosynthesis, they could simply burrow into the ground and never need to eat again. Moreover, trees are generally very resilient. Broken branches can regrow the following year. I wonder what kind of world this is. It looks like Japan, but I don't think there's a city in Japan called Fuyuki City. Using his transformation spell, George quickly transformed from tree form back into human form. Looking around, he knew he had entered another world he didn't recognize. After creating so many clones, he had summarized some patterns. Looking at all the worlds he had created so far, they were basically stories from movies, television, comics, anime, and novels. These story worlds could be roughly traced back to three main categories. The first category was Western-style story worlds, such as the main Marvel Universe, Middle-earth, Harry Potter, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, and the Battle of the Twin Cities. Because he preferred these in his previous life, he had seen them all and had a general understanding of them, making them the easiest worlds to navigate. The second category was Japanese-style story worlds, such as the world of Academy City, Fairy Tail, and Cardcaptor Sakura. He had seen some of these when he was a child, and some appeared later and he hadn't seen them. But based on the environment and mainstream forces and powers of those worlds, he could determine that they were generally set in Japan, only the place names were fictional. This world was clearly similar. The third category is probably the domestic story world category, and so far only the world of key cultivation has appeared. However, all worlds have one thing in common, which is that they are definitely not ordinary worlds. There will definitely be magic, or Taoist arts. Since it is an unknown world, let's not rush to act and see how things go first. Transforming from tree form into human form, concealing all his aura, and disguising himself as an ordinary person, George climbed over the wall and chased after Imaya Shirao and Matao Sakura. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 607 Servant Summoning. With George's current strength, he could easily fly into the air, unleash his full mental power to cover the entire city, and then find powerful individuals with magical abilities to search their souls and gather information about this world. But he didn't do that. He wasn't inherently arrogant, he was rather rational. He was strong now, but that didn't mean there weren't stronger beings in the new world, or that he could act with impunity. Without knowing the new world's information, quietly gathering information was the wiser choice. Although he had many clones, losing one wouldn't be a major blow. It was completely unnecessary. New clones represented pathways to acquiring new power, and once he advanced to the single universe level, he would have another world he created. When his clones merged in the future, each additional clone would increase the success rate of advancing to the multiverse level. Like the world where he cultivated Ki, it wasn't too late to act after gathering all the information and confirming there was no danger. Imaya Shirao and Matao Sakura are no ordinary people. Let's follow them and observe for now. Stealthily following behind Imaya Shirao and Matao Sakura, George wasn't in a hurry to gather intelligence elsewhere. When he first awoke from his maple tree clone, he noticed that the two high school students in that courtyard were extraordinary. The female teacher was a normal person, but both high school students possessed flowing magical energy. Crucially, it wasn't just ordinary magical energy. He sensed that besides the magical energy emanating from their bodies, there were also magical fluctuations emanating from two special magical artifacts. Although he hadn't examined them closely, based on his mental strength and research into the laws of magic, he could determine that these two magical artifacts were not ordinary magical artifacts. They possessed extremely high levels of magical energy fluctuations, making it difficult even for him to create them with his current level of crafting skills. This was one of the reasons he had been cautious from the beginning. The presence of such high-level magical artifacts within their bodies indicated that the two were not ordinary individuals. They might be the protagonists of this story. Therefore, following them would likely allow him to easily gather important information about this world. If his judgment was wrong, he could always go elsewhere to gather intelligence later. Anyway, it's only a few days, he can afford to waste it. Shirao Imaya and Sakura Matao parted ways at the school building. Shirao went to the second-year classroom, and Sakura went to the first-year classroom. Thought form, his main body continued to follow Shirao, while a separate thought form stayed by Sakura's side. He didn't let either of them go. This guy, so this is his personality. George noticed that even before classes started that morning, Shirao had already helped a bunch of classmates, never refusing anyone who asked, a typical good-natured person. However, he also noticed that Shirao seemed unaware of the powerful magical artifact within him, and his own application of magic was only to the point of repairing electrical appliances. Interestingly, among Shirao's classmates at school, he discovered another girl with magical powers, Rin Tasaka. Unlike Shirao, who possessed a very powerful magical artifact within him but was only a half-baked apprentice mage, Rin Tasaka was quite skilled in using magic. Therefore, he created another thought form to follow Rin Tasaka. At school, the three of them behaved normally throughout the day, like ordinary high school students, going to get out of class, eating, and resting. However, things changed after school. First, there was some information about Rin Tasaka that piqued George's interest. A rich girl, but it seems there's no one else at home. George followed Rin into a huge, luxurious villa. A quick scan revealed that the entire villa was empty, with only Rin living there. After entering the villa, Rin Tasaka routinely pressed the answer button on her phone. Message from 3:21 p.m. on January 31st, it's me. Tomorrow is the deadline. If you're too leisurely, it'll give me a headache. There are still 2 slots available, for the Saber and Archer classes. Summon your servants and activate your command seals as soon as possible. Of course, if you don't want to participate in the Holy Grail War, that's another story. If you value your life, come to the church as soon as possible. Before the message was even finished, Rin Tasaka impatiently hung up. HMPH, I know without you saying it, swordsmen and archers, summon servants, the Holy Grail War, and the church. It seems the magic community in this world is quite complex, George thought to himself as he watched Rin Tasaka head straight for the villa's basement. So many spellbooks, it must be a magic family with some history. Upon entering the basement, George saw it was filled to the brim with spellbooks, though covered in dust. With such wealth and so many spellbooks, Rin Tasaka's family was probably a magic family with a long and distinguished history. Perfect, I'll copy them all and take them back to read. The spellbooks not only recorded the magic of this world but also many historical events. Through these spellbooks, he could roughly understand the level of magicians in this world. This magic circle is interesting. Besides the piles of spellbooks everywhere, George also noticed a very special magic circle engraved in the center of the basement. With his level of magic, even though it was a different world, he could tell it was a very special summoning magic circle. Could this be what summoning a servant means? Combining this with what the church person had said on the phone, he had some guesses. And his guesses were quickly confirmed. Rin Tasaka had already taken out a gem imbued with her magic and placed it in the magic circle. Time confirmed, wavelength perfect. As long as it's combined with my magic, even without a medium, I can summon a swordsman for you to see. Infusing the gem's magic into the magic circle, she began to chant the corresponding incantation. Its foundation is silver and iron, the great Duke of Stone and Covenant. Its ancestor is my forefather, Zubei. Now, the gates open on all 4 sides but are all closed. Emerging from the crown, as the incantation rang out, the magic circle immediately lit up with a dazzling light. Standing to the side, George felt that the magic circle was now traversing space, drawing powerful magic from the depths of the earth, connecting to a special place. A soul has been summoned, and it has even condensed a physical body. This summoning magic is quite interesting. Seeing the entire summoning ritual end and a figure land in the villa, George couldn't help but become interested in this special summoning magic and its principles. He had never encountered this form of magic before. Chapter 608 Archers and Cavalry. Perfect. Without a doubt, I've drawn the strongest swordsman. Feeling her summoning perfectly accomplished, Rin Tasaka excitedly ran towards the heroic spirit that had landed on the first floor. Duplicate. Seeing Rin leave, George used a copy spell to duplicate all the books in the basement, then also arrived on the first floor. A young man in red with white hair was sitting on the sofa. Rin was confirming his identity with him. Because of a mistake in the summoning time, Rin hadn't summoned the swordsman she wanted, but rather the remaining archer. Through their conversation, George learned some more information. For example, this summoning circle could summon fragments of heroic spirits from a place called the Throne of Heroes to fight for them. These heroic spirits were mostly famous heroes from history, and some were even demigods. A few might even come from the future. However, these summoned heroic spirits, or servants, weren't entirely under the control of their summoning master. The master could only force the heroic spirit to command 3 times using a command spell formed on their right wrist. Normally, servants wouldn't oppose their masters, as they also want to win the Holy Grail War alongside them. What exactly is the Holy Grail War? Their conversation didn't elaborate, only mentioning that 7 people participate in it's highly anticipated by the entire magical world and the church. Go back and check those spellbooks, they should have detailed information. Seeing Rin Tosaka finish communicating with her servant and begin washing up and going to sleep, George also withdrew his mental form. Meanwhile, on the other side, the mental form tracking Sakura Matao also made significant progress. A wealthy family indeed, Sakura Matao's mansion was no smaller than Rin Tosaka's, only one a modern villa and the other a retro-style courtyard. Another historically significant magical family, following Sakura Matao into the mansion, George quickly spotted a powerful mage, the current head of the Matao family, Awaken Matao. He was Sakura Matao and Shinji Matao's grandfather. Of course, powerful here only refers to his strength compared to ordinary mages, there was no comparison to him. He hadn't yet discovered any truly extraordinary mages. The only one that caught his eye was the magical artifact within Shirao Umiyaya, which possessed power at the level of laws. Sakura Matao's magical artifact wasn't bad either. Huh? This guy's body. George carefully scans Awaken Matao's body with his mental energy and discovered that the old man's body wasn't a normal human body at all, but rather composed of special magical insects. He had actually found these magical insects within Sakura Matao as well. I guess this is the Matao family's unique magic. Any discoveries? Awaken Matao, leaning on his cane, asked Sakura Matao. Sakura Matao silently shook her head. No, go down. Continue monitoring. If you find any connection between him and the Eansburn family, report to me immediately. Awaken Matao waved his hand coldly. Sakura Matao immediately breathed a sigh of relief, but didn't leave the room as usual. The time her grandfather sent her to meet Shirao Umiyaya was, in her opinion, the most beautiful time of her life, being able to spend every day with a person she secretly loved. Unfortunately, she knew it was a dream she would eventually wake up from, and even though she felt something for him, she dared not hope for anything to develop. Besides, she was no longer pure. Grandpa, I don't want to participate in the Holy Grail War, and I don't want to hurt anyone else. She can't, but I can. Let me participate in the Holy Grail War, and I will definitely win the Holy Grail for you, Grandpa. Hearing this, Shinji Matao, on the other side of the room, immediately stepped forward excitedly and volunteered. As the eldest grandson of the Matao family, not inheriting the magic circuits and being unable to become a mage was his greatest shame. On the contrary, this granddaughter whom her grandfather had adopted not only possessed extremely high magical talent and inherited all the magic of the Matao family, but could also summon heroic spirits to represent the Matao family in the Holy Grail War. This made him insanely jealous. So, in recent years, whenever he was slightly unhappy, he would vent his frustrations on this stepsister, making her understand who the true future head of the family was. He even repeatedly engaged in physical possession to satisfy his ego. Alright, then Sakura used the Book of the False Subject to temporarily transfer control of the heroic spirit. Surprisingly, Awaken Matao didn't object, but nodded expressionlessly. Shinji Matao and Sakura Matao both showed expressions of surprise. Neither had expected their grandfather to agree to their request. The ruler becomes the subject receives the curse. Sakura Matao activated her magic, using her magical power to condense a book covered in magical runes, then branded the command seals from her left hand onto the book's cover. At the same time, a purple-haired heroic spirit wielding a short sword with chains appeared behind Shinji Matao. This heroic spirit wore a black leather outfit, her knee-length purple hair seemed to possess a life of its own, her figure was mature and voluptuous, and her aura was full of allure and seductive charm. Medusa, from now on, you must get along well with your brother. Sakura Matao covered her injured hand from branding the command seals with her sleeve, gently instructing the night-type heroic spirit Medusa. Medusa glanced at Shinji Matao, her expression indifferent. A servant's strength stems not only from their own abilities but, more importantly, from their master's magical power. Sakura's magical power was immense, enough for her to unleash most of her original form's power. But Shinji Matao was essentially an ordinary person with no magical power. She couldn't even unleash 1,000th of her original form's strength. Crucially, Sakura's tragic past was very similar to her own. She liked Sakura, and Shinji Matao only disgusted her. Ha ha ha, I finally become a master. Very good, Sakura, you're very good. From today onwards, I've decided to treat you a little better. Shinji Matao's expression was incredibly smug and happy after receiving the Book of the False Servant. So this Sakura Matau is one of them too. George, hidden in the shadows, witnessed the entire heroic spirit transfer ceremony and thought to himself, Medusa, could it be the Medusa from mythology with her snake-like head and petrifying eyes? However, even if it was the Medusa from mythology, she wasn't a significant figure to him now. After all, even Odin and Zeus couldn't stop him when he unleashed his full power. This only made him more interested in the magic of summoning heroic spirits in the Holy War. The fact that even mythical monsters could be summoned as heroic spirits certainly had research value. As expected, this family has quite a few books. After Matau Sakura fell asleep, George went to the Matau family's library and copied all the magic books, which were no less than, and perhaps even more numerous than, those of the Tasakarin family. He planned to read through all the books from both families in the next few days, believing that this would give him a basic understanding of the world. Chapter 609 Holy Grail War. The next day, George stopped following Shirawi Midaya and instead devoted himself entirely to studying the spellbooks. As he quickly devoured each book, he gained a comprehensive understanding of magic in this world and the so-called Holy Grail War. Firstly, the races in this world weren't just humans, there were also vampires, fantasy species, and homunculus. Vampires were relatively rare, fantasy species had mostly migrated to the inner world, and homunculus were products created by ancient sorcerers using alchemy. Currently, the main inhabitants of this world were humans and human sorcerers. Human sorcerers were further divided into two types, magicians and wizards. The difference was that magic could be achieved using modern technology, while spells could not. In the past, when technology was less advanced, most sorcerers were called wizards. With technological advancements, they had mostly become magicians. Those who could be called wizards were now extremely rare. But regardless of whether they were magicians or sorcerers, they all needed innate magical circuits within their bodies. Only by possessing these circuits could they convert life force into magical energy to drive spell formulas and unleash various kinds of magic. These spells are mainly divided into 7 elements: earth, water, fire, wind, void, emptiness, and nothingness. Although different from the elemental classifications of the previous world, they are still quite different and not particularly strange. Interestingly, the magicians of this world add characteristics to their spells, that is, attaching meaning to the 7 elemental magics and expanding their versatility. For example, when the strengthening characteristic is given to the fire element, the fire will burn more intensely. When the strengthening characteristic is given to the water element, the water will increase in volume more violently and flow faster. And according to the spellbooks, truly powerful magicians fight using concepts against concepts. Neither family's collection of books records any high-powered spells, most of them discuss basic principles. However, George doesn't need any high-powered spells, he doesn't lack those powerful spells. His main focus is on learning new magical concepts and perfecting his own magical system. As for the Holy Grail War, it is explained clearly in the books. The story begins in the Age of Gods. The Age of Gods refers to the era when gods flourished, divided into the First Age of Gods and the Second Age of Gods. The First Age of Gods was from the Jurassic to the Cretaceous period. The Second Age of Gods spanned from 12,000 BC to 4,500 BC. At that time, the world was ruled by gods, whose will, and the will of the planets, was unrelated to human will. They were merely the embodiment of natural concepts. Later, the gods perished, though the details of their demise are not recorded in the 2 books. In any case, from then on, human magicians made reaching the root their ultimate goal. What is the root? In the magician's concept, the root is the vortex of origin, the cause of everything in the world, the source of everything. Reaching the root grants immortality, mastery of all the laws of the world, and even the ability to create new worlds and become a creator god. Thus, countless magicians made various attempts, and the Holy Grail War was one of them. The Holy Grail War was founded by 3 magic families, also known as the Big Three. The Tasaka family, which provided the land, the Matau family, which created the heroic spirit summoning magic, and the Eansburn family, which created the Holy Grail. The reason the magic books he obtained contain such detailed records is because these magic books all originated from one of the 2 families that founded the Holy Grail War. However, the 3 original families have now declined. The Tasaka family now only has Rin Tasaka, a high school magical girl. The Matau family, besides the patriarchs Awaken Matau and Shinji Matau, who lacks magical talent, has no one else. Sakura Matau was adopted into the Tosaka family and is Rin's younger sister, but judging from her life in the Matau family today, she doesn't seem to be doing well. As for the Ainsburn family, they are a special family. During the Age of Gods, they were originally created by the apprentices of the third magician using their superb alchemy. By chance, they created the homunculus known as the Winter Saintess, Chistessa. But because it was accidental, no matter how hard they tried, they could not create another homunculus of the same level. Centuries later, magicians succumbed to the limitations of their own abilities, some left the castle, and some took their own lives. The remaining homunculus, though abandoned by their creators, inherited the magician's ideals and continued their research. Then, Justiza sacrificed herself, transforming into a magical circuit capable of drawing magical energy from the Earth's ley lines, the so-called Greater Grail. With the abundant magical energy provided by the Greater Grail, the summoning servant magic circle created by the Matau family could connect to the Throne of Heroes, initiating the true Holy Grail War. In a normal Holy Grail War, 7 mages are selected, each summoning a servant representing a swordsman, cavalry, spearman, archer, mage, assassin, or berserker. These 7 fight under the supervision of the Church and the Mages Association, with the victor obtaining the Lesser Grail, which grants any wish through the ritual. However, according to records, the first 4 Holy Grail Wars all failed. This was the 5th. The first Holy Grail War occurred around 1800, when masters lacked command seals, and not all summoned servants were willing to obey orders. Ultimately, the ritual failed before it could be completed. The second Holy Grail War occurred around 1860. Although command seals were completed, it failed for other reasons. The third Holy Grail War occurred around 1930. Due to the involvement of human armies in World War II, the Lesser Grail was destroyed, and the Greater Grail also malfunctioned, resulting in a similar defeat. The fourth Holy Grail War occurred around 1990. The reason for the defeat is not recorded, but it also ended in failure. Now it's 2000, the fifth Holy Grail War. So, whether a victory in the Holy Grail War can grant all wishes, whether it can reach the vortex of root, and achieve immortality and control over the laws of the entire world is completely uncertain. George was initially quite interested in the Lesser Grail, which could supposedly grant any wish, but after reading the records of the first 4 Holy Grail Wars, he couldn't help but chuckle. After all that talk, it was all just speculation from the 3 founding families, and nothing had actually been achieved. It's worth a try, though. Although he felt that the so-called Holy Grail War ritual probably wouldn't achieve that effect, George still thought it was worth participating. First, the entire ritual was still very valuable for research. Second, if it really worked, and he could use the ritual to enter the vortex of root of this world and master all the laws of this world, then his small world should be able to be directly perfected, reaching the level of a single universe. Even if he ultimately fails, there's no real loss. He's figured out that in this world without gods, nothing can pose a threat to him. Even if someone summons a true god-level heroic spirit, there's nothing to fear. Chapter 610 Lancers have always been lucky, 7 participants, 6 have already emerged, leaving 1 more. But there's no rush, even if all 7 are present, we can forcibly seize the right to participate. George released all the spellbooks. According to the phone call Rin Tosaka received earlier, 5 participants had already summoned their servants, with Rin being the 6th. The servant with the swordsman title remained unsummoned. If he wasn't mistaken, the 7th person was likely Shirao Imaya. According to records, the master representing the swordsman among the participants in the 4th Holy Grail War was named Garetsugu Imaya, who was Shirao Imaya's adoptive father. Furthermore, Shirao Imaya possessed a magical artifact resembling a sword sheath, most likely the medium used to summon the swordsman. He had 2 options for participating in the Holy Grail War. One was to use the medium within Shirao Imaya to summon the swordsman, becoming the 7th person. This wasn't difficult. He had seen summoning circles, detailed in the Matau family's spellbooks. With his skill level, he could analyze it in a few minutes and use it perfectly. Secondly, any participant can be randomly chosen, the master killed, and a new contract formed with the already summoned heroic spirit to become a master. This is actually part of the Holy Grail War. The Holy Grail War requires the simultaneous killing of both the master and the heroic spirit to end one side's war. Otherwise, the master can summon a new heroic spirit while alive, and the heroic spirit can form contracts with other mages to participate in the war again. As for the magic for forming contracts, the Matau family's library contains it, The Matau family is known for creating summoning arrays, so naturally they have a lot of such magic. Matau Sakura can even temporarily lend her heroic spirit to Matau Shinji, an ordinary person, allowing Shinji to become a master and participate in the Holy Grail War. This guy, injured, speak of the devil, and he appears. Just as George guessed that Imaya Shirao was the 7th master, he saw Imaya Shirao return. The combined libraries of the two families are quite extensive. Even with his mental strength, it would take him 2 days to read and understand them all. It's now the evening of the 3rd day. However, Shirao Imaya was clearly not in good condition at this moment. He was dazed, pale, and had a pool of blood on his chest. Upon closer inspection, although there was blood and his clothes on his chest and back were torn, there were no wounds on his body. This situation indicated that someone had pierced his chest with a weapon similar to a spear, but then healed him with healing magic. Am I being chased? Shirao Imaya muttered to himself as he entered the room. Suddenly, George sensed a figure approaching at an extremely fast speed. It was a young man dressed in blue, holding a red spear. He felt similar to the archer that Rin Tasako had summoned earlier. He was probably another servant summoned by another master among the 7. Holding a spear, he must be a spearman. Being chased by a spearman, it seems I guessed right. Leaping across the rooftops, the blue-clad young man quickly arrived above Shirao Imaya's house. Then, holding a spear, without saying a word, he thrust it downwards. Shirao Imaya, lying in the room, quickly dodged, grabbed a roll of paper, enhanced it with his magic, and used it as a weapon to fight the lancer. Unfortunately, the difference in their strength was too great. After one round, Shirao was kicked out of the room and landed in the yard. This was mainly because the lancer didn't immediately kill him. Why did you want to kill me? Shirao Imaya struggled to his feet and asked, puzzled. He had just been cleaning the archery club's dojo at school when he saw 2 strange guys fighting. Then, one of them shot him through the body. In his dazed state, he seemed to see a girl save him. When he woke up, he found that the 2 strange people had disappeared, so he went home. He had just arrived home when the person who killed him came after him again. He couldn't understand why this strange person wanted to kill him when he had no grudge against him. I can't help it. I don't want to kill you either, but according to the rules of the Holy Grail War, witnesses must be killed. You're just unlucky. The young man swaggered around with his spear, his face full of helplessness. Looks like it was just an accident. Hearing their conversation, George knew he was wrong. He had thought the lancer was chasing Shirao Imaya because Shirao was also one of the masters participating in the Holy Grail War. Turns out, it was just because he witnessed a battle between servants. Save him or not, Shirao Imaya had nothing to do with him. Given his personality, he'd act entirely based on his mood in this situation. He wasn't exactly a champion of justice. Besides, if Shirao Imaya were killed, he could easily take the magical item inside him that interested him. But the next second, he changed his mind. He noticed that in the moment of crisis, the outline of a command seal was faintly appearing on Shirao Imaya's left hand, and a magic circle for summoning servants had appeared in the warehouse next to the courtyard. So it really is the 7th master. Having completely confirmed Shirao Imaya's identity, George decided to act. You just wanted to give him a quick death, but you have to struggle like this. Seeing Shirao Imaya get up and prepare to flee towards the warehouse, the lancer sighed, picked up his spear, and prepared to go in and finish him off. Just then, he suddenly felt a branch attack from behind, tightly encircling his right ankle. Before he could react, he was lifted up and slammed to the ground. Boom! 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 Hearing the sounds behind him, Shirao Imaya stopped and turned around, his expression instantly changing from anger at being chased to surprise and disbelief. A tree has become a spirit. He saw the maple tree that he and his adoptive father had planted, which had been dead. Now, it had become tall and lush, using its branches to entangle the person chasing him, repeatedly slamming him to the ground. The arrogant young man from before was now coughing up blood. Who dares to ambush me? The spearman, after being repeatedly slammed a dozen times, finally reacted. His spear glowed red, and he swiftly cut a branch binding him, flipping onto the ground and carefully looking around. Unlike Shirao Imaya, he didn't think the tree had become a spirit. Instead, he suspected a nearby magician skilled in plant magic was secretly manipulating the tree to ambush him. Lancer, you're unlucky to have met me. But that spear of yours is interesting. At that moment, George transformed from tree form back into human form, looking at the red spear in the Lancer's hand with great interest. Even though he had only casually extended some small branches. Given his physique, those branches were far harder than ordinary steel. The Lancer's spear could easily cut through anything. It wasn't an ordinary magical weapon. Chapter 611. Are you my master? Probably a noble phantasm. A noble phantasm is a weapon celebrated in the legends of heroic spirits. It is said to possess power far beyond the reach of modern magicians, and once used, it unleashes the legendary effects. Since the strength and effectiveness of noble phantasms depend on the legends surrounding them, they are also described as weapons created with human imagination as their framework. Noble phantasms are not necessarily melee weapons, they can be a skill or an object. This Lancer is a heroic spirit, so the spear in his hand is very likely noble phantasm from his legend. In fact, after reading the magic books of the two families, George had already guessed that the scabbard inside Shirawi Midaya's body was also a noble phantasm. Otherwise, given his understanding of the power of human magicians in this world, they shouldn't be able to create magical items with law-like effects. Even with his current alchemy skills, he would have difficulty creating one. He's turned into human. Seeing George transform from a tree into human, both the Lancer and Shirawi Midaya exclaimed in surprise. The Lancer initially thought a magician was manipulating trees to attack him, but it turned out the tree itself was attacking him. Was this also the magician's magic? Shirawi Midaya was equally astonished. The tree he had raised had not only come to life, but had also transformed into a person. You might not be so surprised if your cat or dog had become human. After all, similar plots often appear in anime, like cat girls, dog girls, and fox girls. But a tree turning into a human, especially a man, was something he'd never seen before. HMPH, playing tricks. Take this, whether the magician was manipulating trees or faking magic, if it was an enemy, it would simply be defeated. Wielding his noble phantasm, the Spear of Death, the Lancer was about to kill George when he suddenly froze, turning to face Shirawi Midaya standing at the warehouse entrance. You are the seventh master, so die. It turned out that the command seal on the back of Shirawi Midaya's left hand was now fully formed, interacting with the summoning circle in the warehouse, seemingly about to complete the summoning ritual. As a heroic spirit, the Lancer knew perfectly well that Shirawi Midaya was the master of the last swordsman. Since he was a master participating in the Holy Grail War, it was even more important to deal with him. Turning his spear, the Lancer leaped up, aiming for Shirawi Midaya, who hadn't yet entered the storage area. Shirawi Midaya was so startled that he fell to the ground. However, just as the spear was about to fall, a figure blocked Shirawi Midaya's path. It was George, who had teleported in. He activated his golden light charm, flicked a finger, and deflected the red spearhead flying downwards. How is this possible? The Lancer, thrown by the immense force, narrowed his eyes. Landing, he spun again, the red spear instantly creating a series of afterimages, aiming for George's vital points. Unfortunately, George completely disregarded this level of attack. He stood still, and no matter where the spear tip aimed at his body, he precisely intercepted it. How could a magician's body be so strong? Seeing that George had intercepted all his attacks with just a single finger, the Lancer had no choice but to temporarily lower his weapon and retreat to the center of the courtyard, a look of astonishment and uncertainty on his face. His name was Koch Yulaine, a hero in Celtic mythology with demigod blood. Even if he couldn't unleash his full power now, he was still not someone a mere human magician could withstand. Moreover, this magician wasn't even using magic, but rather surpassing him in physical attributes. Every attack he launched was easily blocked by the opponent, which could only mean that the opponent was at least one level stronger than him in terms of strength, speed, and reaction. Just as Koch Yulaine stopped, the magic circle in the warehouse erupted with a blinding light, and the summoning ritual was completely completed. Koch Yulaine looked wary. This magician was already giving him a headache, and if the swordsman came out and teamed up with this magician, it would be even more troublesome. George, on the other hand, was somewhat curious, wondering what level the swordsman that Rin Tosaka wanted most was. As for Shirawi Midaya, he was still in a daze. He was just an apprentice magician, having learned some minor magic for repairing electrical appliances from his adoptive father, and knew nothing about the magical world or the Holy Grail War. So, taking advantage of the opportunity, he shifted his position slightly and hid behind a large rock next to the warehouse. It wasn't that he was cowardly, it was just that he wouldn't be able to help at all, and might even hinder Mr. Maple. If Mr. Maple were at a disadvantage, he would definitely rush up to help, fighting alongside the Mr. Maple who had saved him. But now, Mr. Maple clearly had the upper hand, and it would be foolish for him to go up and distract Mr. Maple. What he needed to do was find a good hiding place, wait for Mr. Maple to defeat the enemy, and then go up to find out what was going on. The light from the summoning magic circle dissipated. A moment later, a girl of about 15 or 16 years old, dressed in armor and a long dress, walked out of the warehouse door. The girl had green eyes and golden hair with a single strand standing up, fair skin, and a solemn expression. She glanced at Ku first, confirming that the other was a heroic spirit like herself, then looked at George. "Excuse me, are you my master? At least not now. It was he who summoned you." George smiled, then pointed to Shiraui Midaya, whose head had emerged from behind a rock. Shiraui Midaya blinked, completely unable to understand what the two were talking about. "The swordsman is out, troublesome. Looks like I have no choice but to use a decisive blow. Take down this magician first, then deal with the swordsman and his master, over there." Ku's magical energy surged, assuming a special stance, his red spear enveloped in red energy, the tip pointed at George. This is quite interesting. George was drawn back to reality by the spearman's astonishing aura, sensing a certain power of lore rising from the red spear, and his face immediately showed extreme interest. He had only been teasing the spearman before, but now he was finally taking it a little seriously. Armor protection. For once, he used a magical shield to envelop himself. With his current level of armor-piercing spell, even a nuclear explosion at point-blank range wouldn't harm him in the slightest. Useless. No defense could withstand this attack. "I'll take your heart, Lancer Chewer," and unleash the true power of his noble phantasm on George, a strike imbued with the law of cause and effect, guaranteeing an absolute hit. Piercing, Spear of Death. The red spear ignored the armor-piercing spell shield, the golden light spell, and George's terrifying physique, piercing straight through George's body. Chapter 612 The Terrifying Magician. Acres. No, this is the piercing thorn spear that can reverse cause and effect. You are the Light of Ireland. Upon seeing the spearman's attack, the female swordsman, also a heroic spirit, immediately recognized his true identity. There's an unwritten strategy in the Holy Grail War. Heroic spirits initially try to conceal their identities. Once recognized, their noble phantasm's abilities can be deduced from mythology, allowing for countermeasures. Summoned heroic spirits, unless previously summoned and encountered each other in previous Holy Grail wars, are generally strangers. After all, while they are heroes, they aren't from the same era. "TCH, I was recognized." Ku withdrew his spear and scoffed. "But it doesn't matter. No one can dodge this spear. I'll send you away too." One less competitor. Despite being recognized and having his attack seen, he wasn't worried at all. He had enough confidence in his strength and techniques. Even that formidable magician was dealt with by his spear in one strike. Mr. Maple, how are you? Seeing George pierced through the heart by a spear, Shiraui Midaya immediately grabbed a reinforced branch he'd found nearby and bravely rushed out to shield George. He was no match for the spearman, but he had to protect Mr. Maple, who had saved him. However, another figure stood before him. "Take him aside and treat him first. I'll handle the spearman." Standing before Shiraui Midaya was the female swordsman. She clasped her hands together, and an invisible longsword appeared in her grasp. If her opponent wanted to finish her off here, she could finish off the spearman here as well, reducing one competitor. I'm fine. Why don't you step aside and wait until I lose before you come at me? Otherwise, it'll seem like we lack chivalry and are ganging up on him." Just as the battle between the swordsman and the spearman was about to erupt, a leisurely voice sounded behind them. "Mr. Maple, you're alright." Shiraui Midaya stared in disbelief at the hole in George's heart, which was repairing at a visible speed, and exclaimed in surprise. "This is impossible. I clearly hide him." The female swordsman and Shiraui Midaya stepped aside, and Ku, seeing George's unharmed chest, also narrowed his eyes. "Sorry, I'm a tree. Trees don't have hearts. At most, you'll just leave a hole in the tree." George took 2 steps forward and beckoned to the spearman with a smile. "Come on, let me see what other tricks you have up your sleeve." The opponent's fatal attack, imbued with the law of cause and effect, had indeed broken through his defenses and pierced his body. But this kind of purely physical attack, even if it took effect, couldn't cause him any harm. Not to mention that his clone was a tree. Trees don't have hearts. Even if the clone were human, piercing his heart wouldn't be fatal. Even if his entire body were reduced to cells, with his current regenerative and magical abilities, he could quickly regenerate. Unless his soul was directly annihilated and sealed, he was an immortal being. It really is a tree. HMPH, my employer is a coward. He ordered me with a command spell to retreat immediately if this move failed. Looks like I'll have to deal with you another time. Ku didn't continue attacking. Instead, he sheathed his spear and leaped onto the roof. Are you trying to escape? The female swordsman frowned and questioned him. This question clearly hurt Ku's pride. He turned his head, his face cold. Escape? I'm just leaving temporarily. But if you chase after me, be prepared to die. With that, he leaped up, about to leave. Bang! Unfortunately, the next second, he seemed to have crashed into transparent glass, bounced back into the courtyard. What happened? Ku stood up, touching his forehead where he had been hit, his eyes filled with confusion. George stepped forward and chuckled. Sorry, I just set up a barrier around the courtyard. No one can leave without my permission. Since you're courting death, I'll grant your wish. Ku, enraged, channeled all his magical power into his spear, leaping high into the air and assuming a throwing stance. You're a tree with no vital points, so I'll vaporize your entire body and make you die. Piercing death spear, his noble phantasm, if activated alone, would be a guaranteed hit. But this required him to assume the stance, not to be interrupted prematurely, and to remain within range. Against enemies who could heal their injuries, or whose ordinary injuries were ineffective, he needed to use the second move of his noble phantasm. Now, the noble phantasm shifted from targeting individuals to targeting armies. While the guaranteed hit effect was gone, it became a terrifying attack capable of destroying an entire city. However, this attack would also exhaust all his magical power. The red spear, carrying immense energy, shot down from the sky towards George below. The immense pressure caused the female swordswoman to frown, gripping her transparent longsword tightly, ready to help George if he couldn't withstand the attack. Shirawi Midaya, an apprentice mage, was even more breathless, his body stiff. This kind of attack is rather pointless. Faced with such a terrifying blow, George shook his head. For him, the causality-based attack he had just used was still worth studying. Attacks focused solely on destructive power were trash. He had far more magic that could achieve the same effect, even far surpassing it. Stop! Just as the red spear was about to touch George's brow, George uttered a single word. With his voice, the spear seemed to be frozen in midair, as if under a spell. The massive red energy within the spear vanished without a trace. Looks like that's all you've got. Let's end it here. Sensing the approaching new master in heroic spirit, George grabbed the red spear and flashed to the disbelieving spearman. Fainted, the stun spell, refined countless times, struck the lancer, temporarily taking him into his own little world. The red spear, though a noble phantasm, was still metal, and metal is subject to his control. Why did the immense energy on the noble phantasm disappear? Of course, it was because he possessed key source flow and devouring magic. Such energy attacks were completely ineffective against him. What a terrifying magician! The female swordsman watched as George effortlessly neutralized the lancer's attack, knocking him unconscious and storing him in an unknown space, and couldn't help but sigh in admiration. Even she, without prior knowledge, would have found it difficult to withstand the lancer's two attacks. Chapter 613 How about I become the master? Mr. Maple, are you alright? Seeing the lancer George had dealt with the attack land from the air, Shirawi Midaya breathed a sigh of relief. However, before he could ask what had happened, the courtyard gate was suddenly pushed open, and a man and a woman rushed in. Tasaka-san, what brings you here? Shirawi Midaya looked at the girl who had entered, a look of surprise on his face. The girl was none other than Rin Tasaka, his classmate in the same grade at school, the vice president of the student council, and a campus goddess who excelled in both character and academics. However, the two were not particularly close, because his friend, the student council president, Kazunori Ryodao, had advised him to avoid contact with Rin to prevent her from being persecuted. The second heroic spirit, I'll handle this one. The female swordsman saw the white-haired, red-clad man standing behind Rin Tasaka and immediately recognized him as a heroic spirit, also understanding that Rin Tasaka was one of the 7 mages. She immediately swung her transparent longsword and slashed. The archer opposite her reacted quickly, conjuring 2 daggers in his hands to block the female swordsman's attack. Stop. Stop fighting. Can you tell me what's going on? Shirawi Midaya rushed between the two, stopping the fight. Rin Tasaka, seeing this, rubbed her forehead. Why are you the seventh one? Well, Emilia-kun, looks like you're a complete novice. Anyway, good evening, Emilia-kun. Good evening, Tasuka-kun. Shirao Emilia looked at the bright-faced Rin Tasuka and replied somewhat embarrassedly. Restored to its original state, George, who was standing there, waved his hand, and the courtyard, which had been damaged by the battle, immediately returned to its original state. This scene also caught the attention of Rin Tasuka and the archer. The female swordsman was clearly a swordsman-type heroic spirit who had been converted, and who was this young man who could perform advanced magic? She had never seen magic that could repair damaged ground before. It must be some kind of advanced magic. Who is he? He's Mr. Maple. He's my family's maple tree transformed. Shirao Emilia tried to explain, but halfway through, he realized he didn't know how to explain it. Saying that the maple tree he planted had transformed into a person and could even do magic? The maple tree transformed? What are you talking about, Emilia-kun? Rin Tasuka touched Shirao Emilia's forehead. He didn't have a fever, so why was he speaking incoherently? Could it be a lingering effect from the incomplete healing after he was stabbed in the chest? Tonight, she was investigating the student disappearances at school and discovered that someone had set up a soul-eating barrier that could corrode human flesh and absorb human souls. Afterwards, she was attacked by lancers. While she was fighting the lancers as an archer, she was unexpectedly seen by Shirao Emilia, who was cleaning the archery club dojo late at night. As a result, Shirao Emilia was stabbed through the heart by a lancer. Fortunately, for some reason, although his heart was pierced, Shirao Emilia didn't die immediately and still had a breath left. She used the ruby her father left her to heal Shirao Emilia's injuries. Actually, back in middle school, she had gone to Shirao and Sakura's school because of student council matters and saw Shirao practicing high jump on the sports field. He kept jumping at an impossible height, which left a deep impression on her, and she often paid attention to this incredible person. Plus, her poor younger sister Sakura seemed to like Shirao too, so she couldn't just ignore it. Therefore, realizing that the spearman might still be chasing Shirao, she immediately led the archers to his rescue. Here's what happened. Tonight at school, Shirao scratched his head and told Rin Tasuka everything about being stabbed by the spearman at school and what happened afterward. Of all the people there, the one he knew and trusted most was Rin Tasuka. George was a maple tree in disguise, and the female swordsman was summoned by a magic circle. They were meeting them for the first time today. Rin Tasuka was a classmate in the same grade and the vice president of the student council. They already knew each other, just not particularly well before. The maple tree you raised turned into a person and even defeated the lancer. Upon hearing Shirao Emilia's account, Rin Tasuka's mouth dropped open. She found it utterly unbelievable. However, for some reason, her intuition told her that Shirao Emilia wasn't lying. But she still found it hard to believe. The lancer was one of the strongest classes in direct combat among the 7 servant classes. And the title of Child of Light of Ireland was no small matter. How could it be defeated by a maple tree, one that Shirao Emilia had planted 10 years ago? Why don't you all come in, have some tea, and chat? George's voice came from the living room. George had already entered and sat down familiarly. Everyone nodded and came to the living room. I'll make you some tea. Before Shirao Emilia could find any tea leaves, George waved his hand, and several cups of hot tea appeared out of thin air on the table. No need, we already have some. This guy's magic. Rin Tasuka's pupils contracted again as she watched George conjure hot tea. As the sole heir of the Tasuka family, she wasn't some half-baked magician like Shirao Emilia. She possessed a profound understanding of magic. However, she had never witnessed George's magic. Repairing a damaged house with a wave of his hand, conjuring hot tea with another, no incantations or magic circles appearing, it was as if even a magician would be performing magic tricks. Well then, let me explain the situation first. Taking a sip of tea, Rin Tasuka began to recount the information about the Holy Grail War. So, that's how it is. You are the 7th master, and the final participant in this Holy Grail War. To be honest, I still don't quite understand. If a master needs a proper magus, I think it's better to choose again. I only learned some basic magic from my father, Shirao Emilia sighed. Besides, this is too absurd. For the so-called Holy Grail, 6 people have to be killed, along with the servants they summoned. He had made a promise with his adoptive father since childhood to be a righteous person and do righteous deeds. In his eyes, this Holy Grail war was unjust. It's not necessarily about killing the master. Eliminating the heroic spirit is also an option. However, killing the master is more efficient than dealing with a powerful heroic spirit. But even if you kill the heroic spirit, as long as the master still has command seals, they can summon a new heroic spirit to continue participating in the war, Rin Tosaka explained. Shirawi Midai's eyes lit up upon hearing this. So, if I use all 3 command seals at once, I can give up my master status. If you're planning to give up being a master, why don't you hand over the master status to me? I'm quite interested in this Holy Grail war. At this moment, George, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 614 I Am Who I Am, a Unique Spark. Excuse me, Mr. Maple, what is your true identity? Before Shirawi Midaya could answer, Rin Tosaka spoke first, looking at George. I'm not as easily fooled as Shirao. I don't believe a 10-year-old maple tree can become a magician, let alone such a powerful one. She believed Shirawi Midaya wasn't lying, but he was just an outsider to the magical world and easily deceived by magic. The fact that the other party wanted Shirawi Midaya's command seals to become his master made it hard for her not to suspect something. With Rin Tosaka's questioning, everyone's attention focused on George. They all wanted to know if George, the magician who could easily defeat Lancers, was indeed a maple tree, why he was here, and what his purpose was. However, George blinked. I am indeed a maple tree now, but I'm not just a maple tree. The specific reason why I became a maple tree is my secret. He didn't fabricate all sorts of lies to deal with people asking about his identity and abilities, like he had magic taught by gods, a magician who had an accident while practicing transfiguration, or someone who studied with an old wizard. Having learned about this world, with his strength, there was absolutely no need for him to fabricate those reasons. What do you care about my identity, or where I learned such amazing magic? If I don't want to tell you, I won't. It's that simple. I am who I am, a unique spark. Seeing that George was unwilling to reveal his identity, Rin Tosaka's expression turned serious. This mysterious Mr. Maple, was he friend or foe? Was he here specifically for Shirawi Midaya's command seals, or did he have some other purpose? If you say that, it's hard for us to trust you, but I don't seem to need your trust. George smiled as he sipped his tea, completely unconcerned about the wariness in Rin Tosaka's eyes. Tosaka-san, everyone has their own secrets. Mr. Maple must have his reasons for not wanting to talk about it. I believe Mr. Maple isn't a bad person. If it weren't for him, I would have been killed twice by the Lancer. Seeing the atmosphere in the living room becoming tense, Shirawi Midaya quickly tried to smooth things over. You rascal, I'm only doing this for your own good. Since you think it's okay, then I'm even less worried. Rin Tosaka, seeing Shirawi Midaya actually siding with George, crossed her arms in anger and said nothing more. But then she thought about it, and realized that it was just Shirao's personality, always putting others' feelings first and always wanting to help. This was one of the reasons she had always liked him. Well, maybe it's a good thing to keep this outsider away from the war. Otherwise, with that kind of personality, he definitely wouldn't survive long in a war. Sakura would definitely be heartbroken then. Mr. Maple, I can transfer the command seals to you, but you have to promise that if we win the Holy Grail War, you won't use the Holy Grail to wish for anything bad. Shirawi Midaya thought for a moment and said to George with a touch of naivety. He was a good person, but not stupid. If George used the Holy Grail to wish for something bad, he definitely wouldn't agree to transfer the command seals. George chuckled upon hearing this. Actually, I have plenty of ways to forcibly take the command seals from you, but I'm not so shameless as to have no bottom line. He took a sip of his tea. So you don't need to worry about me using the Holy Grail to wish for anything bad. Because I'm a person with principles. He wasn't surprised to see the strange expressions on the faces of Rin Tosaka, the female swordsman, and the archer. Although he had defeated the Lancer, every heroic spirit had their own pride and unique noble phantasm. Before the fight, no one thought they would definitely lose. Therefore, apart from Shirawi Midaya, the other three were somewhat dismissive of George's words. If George dared to forcibly take Shirawi Midaya's command seals, the female swordsman, as his direct subordinate, would be the first to intervene. Then, Rin Tosaka, as his classmate, would also help, and Rin's heroic spirit, under her orders, would not stand idly by. In other words, George would be ganged up on by a magician and 2 heroic spirits. In this day and age, a magician who could withstand a gang attack from 2 heroic spirits on his own was unheard of. Don't believe me? George lightly tapped the table with his finger. Time. Freeze. The power of time swept through the entire living room, freezing everyone except George in place. At his level, a single time spell could eliminate most enemies. Unless the enemy was at the level of a celestial father, perhaps they could forcibly break free of the time seal through sheer power. Otherwise, enemies who hadn't studied time magic would be frozen in place and at his mercy in no time. The individuals before him hadn't reached the celestial father level in terms of individual strength. The strength of many heroic spirits wasn't due to their inherent power, but rather noble phantasms bestowed upon them by people through illusions in mythology. Like that Lancer before, in terms of physical strength and combat skills, he would only be at the Earth level in the Marvel Universe, and might not even be able to defeat Thor. Conchuline was a demigod, while Thor was a true god. But the noble phantasm he wielded could unleash attacks imbued with causality, something even George couldn't do. Therefore, facing the time magic, neither of the 2 heroic spirits could break through the seal. Both were struck. One was a swordsman, the other an archer. Neither was proficient in magic, let alone time magic. If it were the mage among the 7 servants present, perhaps there would be some hope of breaking the spell. As for Shirawi Midaya and Rin Tosaka, one was a novice, and the other, despite his family's magical background, was still young. Their actual magical strength wasn't particularly strong within the mage community. Asking them to break the time magic seal was simply a pipe dream. Snap! With a snap of her fingers, Rin Tosaka and the female swordsman instantly swapped clothes. Snap! With another snap, Shirawi Midaya and the white-haired archer also swapped clothes. These two, they actually look quite alike. After swapping clothes, Rin Tosaka and the female swordsman looked very different, quite contrasting. After all, one was slightly flat-chested, the other voluptuous. One wore a Japanese school uniform with black stockings and a miniskirt, the other a medieval noblewoman's long dress. But after swapping clothes, Shirawi Midaya and the white-haired archer didn't seem to change much. He hadn't noticed before, but now, looking closely, the two seemed very similar in every way except for their hairstyles and colors. Especially their facial features. One was younger and more innocent, the other more mature and cold. Interesting. George's lips curled into a slight smile as he extracted a sliver of their souls for comparison. He discovered that the essence of their souls was exactly the same. Chapter 615 A Wish. So what the book said was true. The Throne of Heroes can actually summon heroic spirits from the future. At this moment, George could no longer fail to realize that the white-haired archer heroic spirit was actually Shirawi Midaya, but not the current Shirawi Midaya, but the future Shirawi Midaya. In other words, Shirawi Midaya would become a hero in the future, and his soul would enter the Throne of Heroes, becoming one of the heroic spirits that could be summoned in the Holy Grail War. He didn't care at all why Shirawi Midaya would become a hero or why he would die around the age of 30. What he cared about was that this meant the Throne of Heroes truly could collect heroic spirits from the past and future. When he first read the description in the magic book, he didn't really believe it. Collecting the souls of heroes who had died in the past as heroic spirits wasn't anything special. He could do that now. But being able to collect the souls of heroes who died in the future was extraordinary. Because it also meant that the Throne of Heroes existed across the river of time, regardless of the past or future, regardless of how many possibilities existed, as long as the conditions were met, they could be collected as heroic spirits. This clearly touched upon the essence of the world. Therefore, using the Holy Grail War to enter the vortex of root might not be impossible after all. The fundamental principle of the Holy Grail War ritual is to inject the souls of the 6 deceased servants into the Lesser Grail through battle. Using their power to return to the Throne of Heroes located outside the world, a hole is opened in this world. The vast magical power accumulated in the Greater Grail is then used to fix this hole, creating a door to the outside world. If the Throne of Heroes transcends the river of time, it might indeed be within the vortex of root. If the hole is opened well, sneaking in isn't impossible. Anyway, we have nothing else to do. Let's take a look at Lancer's memories first. Without dispelling the time magic, George released the Lancer, Kuchu Lane, whom he had knocked unconscious, and began reading his memories. He would use time magic to hold him in place for a while longer, Only after dispelling it would the others believe his words. His father was the sun god Ruger, and his mother was Dexual of the Ulster royal family. He possessed superhuman strength from a young age and later joined the famous Red Branch Knights. At 16, he traveled to the Land of Shadows to pursue his love, where he was chosen by Kamar-Taj, the witch and ruler of the Land of Shadows, to train in martial arts. There, he acquired astonishing magic and an invincible magic spear. To defend his homeland, he fought fiercely in the war, slaughtering not only a large number of enemy soldiers but also countless women and children. In the end, he died from his own magic spear, becoming a heroic spirit of the Throne of Heroes. After that, he was summoned by Bazet, a female mage of the Mages Association, using her earring as a medium. Unfortunately, he didn't spend much time with his most compatible master before his master was ambushed and killed by his friend, Kamar-Taj. Kamar-Taj, this hypocritical church priest, became his new master. I didn't expect this guy to have so much magical knowledge in his head. I thought he was just a spear-wielding warrior, releasing the spearman and throwing him back into the small world. George's face showed a hint of surprise. Judging from Cuchulain's fighting style, he was clearly a warrior, but after reading through his life's memories, it became clear that he had also learned a considerable amount of magic, especially ancient rune techniques. However, he preferred close combat and disliked using magic. Rune techniques had long been lost to the modern magic system of this world, making them still valuable for research. However, to his disappointment, Cuchulain didn't even understand the principle behind his own causality attack. He had simply used the techniques inherent in his noble phantasm instinctively. Therefore, to master this causality-based attack method and study the related laws, he still needed to study Cuchulain's magic spear. It seems we can't kill this spearman yet. If the spearman died, his noble phantasm would naturally disappear as well. That's about enough. An hour later, George raised his hand and dispelled the time magic in the hall, and everyone returned to normal. My clothes, how did this happen? The two humans and two heroic spirits, seeing their clothes had been changed, asked similar questions almost simultaneously. In their view, 1 second they were listening to George speak, and the next second their clothes had been replaced. Just changing clothes doesn't prove anything, Reincarnated said, somewhat unconvinced. The ability to switch their clothes without them noticing was indeed impressive, but it could also just be a unique form of magic. If this unique magic was simply changing clothes, it wouldn't be enough to defeat a powerful heroic spirit. If you looked at that clock outside, you might not think that way. George pointed to the ancient clock tower standing in the city center in the distance, its hands currently stopped at 12. How could it be 12? Shirawi, standing beside him, showed disbelief first. He returned home a little after 10 when he was stabbed by the spearman, and it wasn't even 11 when he sat down for tea. It was now at most a little after 11. Could it be, you just now? Reincarnated looked at George in disbelief. At this moment, she had already guessed that George hadn't just changed their clothes, but had directly frozen their time. Magic that could manipulate time was beyond the realm of high-level magic. It was legendary magic, something only the gods of the Age of Gods could do. Similarly, the female swordsman and archer were also startled, their guesses coinciding with Reincarnated's. Looks like you guessed it, which is why I said it would be easy for me to forcibly take the command seals. George turned to Shirawi. Transfer the command seals to me, and in exchange, I can grant you one wish within my power. For example, making you the world's richest person, or making the person you like fall in love with you, or becoming the leader of your country. These are all possibilities, no need. I trust Mr. Maple. You saved me and promised not to wish for anything bad after obtaining the Holy Grail. I'm satisfied. Shirawi raised his right hand, revealing the command seals on the back of his hand. He wasn't a greedy person. George looked at Shirawi. You'd better think it over. I not only want the command seals, but I also want to study the medium within you that can summon heroic spirits. The medium within me, Shirawi clearly didn't know. George reached out and pressed on Shirawi's stomach, forcefully sucking out a beautifully crafted scabbard from his body. This is a distant paradise. The female swordsman, who had been silent until now, stood up abruptly upon seeing the scabbard. Chapter 616 The Fake Priest's Identity Exposed. For the female swordsman, changing masters didn't matter. If someone forced her master to hand over command seals through force, out of chivalry, she would protect her master even to her last breath. But clearly, Shirawi Midaya didn't want to participate in the brutal holy war and was voluntarily handing over his command seals. She had participated in the Fourth Holy War and knew how cruel it was. Shirawi Midaya was still a high school student and shouldn't be involved. Moreover, Shirawi Midaya's magical power was too weak, greatly reducing her potential and making her unsuitable to be a master. On the other hand, this Mr. Maple was clearly a powerful magician. As her new master, she could unleash much greater power. This would benefit her in winning the Holy Grail and wishing to change the fate of Great Britain. Therefore, she hadn't commented on the previous conversations, quietly observing and waiting for the final outcome. Until the distant utopia was extracted from Shirawi Midaya's body. Because this was the scabbard of her strongest noble phantasm, Excalibur, and one of her noble phantasms. Once the scabbard's ability is activated, it can ignore any attack, even a terrifying attack capable of cleaving the entire world in two. If the user is injured, it can also slowly heal their wounds. How did you get my scabbard? Who is Karatsugu Midaya to you? The female swordsman turned to Shirawi Midaya. Shirao replied, he's my adoptive father. Do you know him? Yes, he was my master during the Fourth Holy War. The female swordsman nodded, saying nothing more. Shirawi Midaya was taken aback for a moment, then his face relaxed. My father was an omnipotent magician. It's not unbelievable that he participated in the Fourth Holy War. He smiled gently and looked at George, saying, it's all right, Mr. Maple. Since it originally belonged to the swordswoman, you can take it and study it as long as she agrees. You child, you're really something else. George sheathed the scabbard and patted Shirawi Midaya on the shoulder. My name is George. You don't need to keep calling me Mr. Maple. I'll save this wish for you. You might need it later. Good people don't die easily, but evil ones live a long life. People with Shirawi Midaya's personality don't live long either. But that doesn't stop him from admiring these kinds of people. Just like some people sacrifice their lives to save strangers, he certainly couldn't do that, but he still admired these kind and righteous heroes. Then I'll begin. Shirawi Midaya had agreed, so George naturally didn't waste any more time and prepared to transfer Shirawi Midaya's command seals to himself, thus participating in the Holy Grail War. However, at this moment, Rin Tosaka interrupted, if you're going to transfer command seals, I suggest you first find the overseer of the Holy Grail War and transfer them under their witness. Otherwise, transferring them privately might be subject to judgment by the Church and the Mages Association. Although the Holy Grail War was initiated by the three starter families, the entire process is supervised by the Church and the Mages Association. It's not something you can do recklessly. For example, the battles cannot be discovered by ordinary people. Shirawi Midaya was being chased by the Lancers because he, as an ordinary person, witnessed a battle between heroic spirits. Furthermore, if masters and heroic spirits indiscriminately slaughter innocent ordinary people, the Church and the Mages Association will suspend the ritual and, together with all participants, deal with the unruly masters and heroic spirits. Heroic spirits are indeed powerful, but the mages of the Church and the Mages Association are not to be underestimated. Most selected participants are generally aware of these facts. Shirawi Midaya's situation was purely accidental. Do you know that supervisor? Shirawi Midaya asked curiously. Rin Tosaka nodded. He's a priest of the Church and also my father's disciple. After my father's death, he became my guardian. So he's both my senior brother and my second master. Your second master isn't named Kyra Ikatamine, is he? George raised an eyebrow. He had just finished reading the Lancer's memories. The guy who stole Bazzet's command seals was also a priest. You know him? Rin Tosaka was clearly taken aback. This mysterious maple tree mage actually knew her senior brother, which surprised her. Was he once a member of the Church or the Mages Association? Kyra Ikatamine. Upon hearing this name, the female swordsman's expression changed. In the Fourth Holy Grail War, her biggest rival, and that of her master Karatsugu Midaya, was Kyra Ikatamine, a psychologically twisted and abnormal individual. You know him too? Rin Tosaka was even more bewildered. The female swordsman replied calmly, yes, he was one of the masters in the Fourth Holy Grail War. Since he's your senior, your father must be Tokayami Tosaka. Yes, my father is Tokayami Tosaka. Rin Tosaka nodded blankly. She knew her father participated in the Fourth Holy Grail War and that he was killed in it. This was actually why she participated in the Fifth Holy Grail War, to fulfill her father's unfulfilled wish. However, she didn't know that her senior, Kyra Ikatamine, had also participated in the Fourth Holy Grail War. So you know your father died at the hands of Kyra-Ekatamine. The female swordsman's next words caused Rin Tosika's pupils to shrink instantly. What did you say? Kyra-Ekatamine's servant in the Fourth Holy Grail War was an assassin, but in the final battle against Kiritsugu Imaya, he became an archer. And the archer was your father's servant. The female swordsman's words were self-evident. If Kyra-Ekatamine hadn't killed Tokayami Tosika, how could he have obtained Tokayami Tosika's servant? I don't know if this Kyra-Ekatamine is the murderer of your father, but I know he's probably not a good person. Because he's the master of Lancer culling, and also a participant in this Holy Grail War. And he even secretly assassinated a friend from the Mages Association, hiding it from the Church and the Mages Association, to secretly gain the qualification to participate. George shared the information he had obtained from Lancer Culling's memories. Rin Tosika wasn't stupid. After receiving the information from the two, and recalling some details from her past interactions with Kyra-Ekatamine, she was already 7 or 8 parts convinced. I'm going to see him. If he really is the murderer of my father, I'll kill him immediately. Then let's go together. Let's see what this priest is up to. George placed his hand on Shirawi Miya's hand and began casting a command seal transfer spell. A moment later, the command seal pattern had transferred from Shirawi Miya's hand to George's. The instant the transfer was complete, the female swordsman sitting there suddenly widened her eyes and jumped to her feet. My power. I can use it completely. Chapter 617 The Birth of the Strongest Master in History. As mentioned before, a servant's strength depends primarily on 2 factors. One is their inherent strength, which is the upper limit. For example, Guan Yu's feat of slaying Huoshang while the wine was still warm. If a mage of equal strength summons both Guan Yu and Huoshang, Huoshang would certainly be no match for Guan Yu. The other is the strength of the master mage, which is the lower limit. A top-tier mage summoning Huoshang can unleash 70% of his original strength due to the magical power provided. However, an apprentice mage summoning Guan Yu can only unleash 1% of his strength due to the insufficient magical power provided. Therefore, even if Guan Yu's inherent strength far surpasses Huoshang's, he would still be no match for Huoshang in this scenario. When the female swordswoman was last summoned, her master was Imaya Kiritsugu. She could basically unleash most of her power, but due to the curse of the Lancer's noble phantasm, Excalibur, which guaranteed destruction, she was sealed from her ultimate attack, Excalibur. The curse also affected her body, keeping her in a negative state. This is why she was consistently at a disadvantage in normal battles. This time, when summoned, Master Shirawi Miya's magical power was negligible. The strength she could exert was even less than after being cursed last time. But after the command seal was transferred to George's hands, she immediately felt her body filled with incredibly powerful magical power, almost as if her entire soul from the throne of heroes had been summoned. Her strength reached its peak. Moreover, she could clearly sense that George's magical power was like an endless ocean. Even if her strength were 100 times greater, his magical power could easily supply it. He was practically the most powerful master in history. Looks like you're in good shape. George sensed that the female swordsman's strength had increased several levels and couldn't help but examine her closely. I still don't know your name, or what your noble phantasm is. Rin Tosika wanted a swordsman class heroic spirit so much, which meant that theoretically, swordsman class heroic spirits should be among the strongest of the 7 classes. So he wanted to see which legendary hero the female swordsman was, and whether the skills associated with her noble phantasm were worth studying. If it was a causal noble phantasm like a Lancer's, that would be quite interesting. Shall we talk about it here now? The female swordsman turned to look at Rin Tosika and the archer. Although these two currently showed no hostility, they were still the final rivals for the Holy Grail. Revealing their true names and noble phantasms would be tantamount to handing over their trump cards, which wouldn't be good for the later stages of the Holy Grail War. George, of course, knew the female swordsman's worries, but he smiled and waved his hand. It's alright, we don't need to hide anything. HMPH, don't be so smug. Who will be the winner in the end is still uncertain. Rin Tosika, seeing that George didn't take her seriously, gave a haughty snort. Indeed, George's time magic had startled her. But in a real battle, they wouldn't sit in the living room giving George the opportunity to use time magic. Her heroic spirit was the archer, whose specialty was long-range sniping, eliminating enemies before they even realized it. That's true, we don't need to be so cautious anymore. The female swordsman nodded inwardly upon hearing this. Not to mention that George, her master, was already unfathomable, capable of single-handedly defeating the Lancers, and she herself had recovered to her peak strength. She wasn't arrogant, but she was very confident in her abilities. My name is Artoria Pendragon, King Arthur of Great Britain, also known as the Night King. I possess the noble phantasms Wind King's Barrier, Excalibur, and Utopia. I can ignore magic below A rank and am skilled at riding any mount, so strong. As expected of a swordsman, Rin Tossica, hearing the female swordsman's impressive abilities, was filled with envy and frustration. If she hadn't accidentally gotten the timing wrong, she should have been the one summoning the swordsman. Turning to look at the white-haired archer leaning against the wall, she sighed inwardly. She didn't yet know her servant's true name and noble phantasm. When asked, the archer said he didn't remember either. Excalibur and Utopia, very worthy of study. George, after hearing this, also showed interest. High magic resistance, masterful control of various mounts, and the Wind King's Barrier with its transparent sword, these were child's play to him. But Excalibur and Utopia were still quite impressive. Excalibur, hailed as the strongest fantasy noble phantasm, was forged from an entire planet, fueled by human faith. It was first managed by the Lady of the Lake, then passed to King Arthur through Merlin. Once drawn, almost no noble phantasm could withstand its power. Its destructive force was terrifying. Utopia, the scabbard within Shirawi Midai's body, possessed absolute defense at the level of laws, rendering even the most powerful magic and physical attacks ineffective. Both noble phantasms possessed law-based attack power, and like the Lancers' noble phantasms, they were worthy of study. King Arthur is actually a girl. Meanwhile, Shirawi Midai's focus was clearly different from everyone else's. King Arthur offered a brief explanation. To become a better king and protect my country, I concealed my gender and have lived as a man. When I pulled the sword from the stone at 15, my body stopped aging. So my actual age is much older than yours. Alright, it's about time. Let's find the Lancer's master and see what kind of conspiracy he's hiding. George wasn't interested in why King Arthur was a woman. Having seen several noble phantasms with good effects, he was now very interested in the noble phantasms of the heroic spirits. Therefore, he had his main body and other clones take time to improve the magic that could transfer command seals they had just used. Before ending the Holy Grail War, he wanted to try to transfer all the command seals of the other masters to himself. After he had studied all the heroic spirits and their noble phantasms thoroughly, he would complete the ritual to see if he could use the small hole drilled out by the Holy Grail War to go to the root. Let's go. Rin Tossica, eager to confront Kyra Ekatamine, quickly got up and led the way out. The church wasn't located in the city center, but rather in a slightly remote suburb. However, Shirawi Midai's house was already quite close to the suburbs. It was only a half-hour walk to their destination. However, they hadn't gone far when they were stopped beside a cemetery. The person who stopped them was a little girl with long silver hair, red eyes, and wearing a purple dress. She looked to be no more than 10 years old. Chapter 618 She's Your Sister. Along with the little girl appeared a terrifyingly muscular man over 2 meters tall, his muscles like steel. This monster, judging solely by magical power, is even stronger than a swordsman. Rin Tossica immediately recognized the man as a summoned heroic spirit. What surprised her, however, was the sheer terror of this heroic spirit's aura. The magical power he exuded was far stronger than Artoria's. Artoria, thanks to George, was currently at her peak. While strong magical power doesn't equate to strong strength, it can still serve as a measure. He's probably a berserker, but with that kind of aura, in a normal Holy Grail war, he could probably take on 6 opponents single-handedly, the archer added solemnly. He glanced at George beside him, thinking to himself, however, with this guy here, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. The mysterious magician George, he still hadn't figured out the berserker's limits. Based on intuition, he felt that even a monstrous berserker might not be George's match. Even based on his understanding of Artoria, he might not be a match for her. Not bad, they've even delivered themselves to my doorstep. George was quite pleased to see new masters and servants appear. He didn't know the names or information about the other masters, so finding them would definitely take some effort. Some might not even be in Fuyuki City yet. Although the final battleground of the Holy Grail War was in Fuyuki City, it didn't mean that masters had to be from Fuyuki City, nor did they necessarily have to be in Fuyuki City to summon servants. They might have summoned their servants elsewhere and then come to Fuyuki City for the final battle after being notified by the church. For example, the original Lancer Master summoned Lancer in England and only arrived in Fuyuki City a few days ago, where he was assassinated by the fake priest. It was normal for some masters not to have brought their servants yet. Now that a master had delivered himself, it saved him time in searching. As for the berserker summoned by this master, to be honest, his strength was quite good, but to him, he was just a stronger ant, posing no threat whatsoever. "It's Aaliyah." Artoria's pupils contracted as she looked at the girl beside the burly man. George noticed Artoria's unusual expression. "You know her, I met her a few times during the last Holy War. She's Kiritsugu Minaya's daughter, Eliasville von Eansburn." Artoria nodded without hiding anything. Shirawi Minaya, standing beside her, widened his eyes upon hearing this. "You mean, she's my sister?" Kiritsugu Minaya was his adoptive father, so Kiritsugu's biological daughter would be his sister, even though they weren't related by blood. Artoria shook her head at Shirawi Minaya. "To be precise, she should be your older sister. She's a year older than you." "What? Older sister?" Shirawi Minaya looked at the silver-haired, red-eyed little girl in front of him, his face full of disbelief. The little girl looked to be less than 10 years old. How could she be a year older than him? Her body seems to have undergone considerable modification. George's mental scan swept over Ilya's body, a look of surprise on his face. At first, he didn't pay much attention to the little girl, but after Artoria mentioned her surname, he began to focus more on her. The little girl's surname was Eansburn. According to the Matau family's magic book, the Eansburn were the last of the 3 founding families. And all of them were homunculus. Sensing with his spiritual power, he found the little girl's magical power to be surprisingly strong. Crucially, he sensed a magical aura containing special laws within her, an aura very similar to that he had sensed in Matau Sakura. Could it be the Holy Grail? At this moment, George had some guesses. According to the Matau family's magic book, the Lesser Grail wished upon at the end of the Holy Grail War was usually created by the Eansburn family. In reality, it was transformed using homunculus as a vessel. Therefore, he guessed that this homunculus named Ilya might be the vessel for the Lesser Grail in the 5th Holy Grail War. However, he didn't understand why, if Ilya was the vessel for the Lesser Grail, Matau Sakura also possessed a similar aura. "Sister Ilya, since we are..." Upon learning that Ilya was his sister, Shirawi Minaya quickly stepped forward to smooth things over, hoping to resolve the conflict peacefully and have a proper chat. However, upon hearing Shirao call her sister, a vein bulged on Ilya's previously calm face. "Sister? You dare call me that? Kill him." Her feelings towards this non-blood-related brother were complex, but mostly filled with hatred. After her father left her, he never returned, even raising a child outside the family. How could she tolerate that? Crucially, for years she had endured countless inhuman tortures and body modifications within the family, all while her father remained indifferent. Therefore, she represented the Eansburn family in the Holy Grail War to see what kind of child her father had chosen to care for, even at the cost of abandoning her. And that child's call of sister had completely ignited the resentment she had harbored for so many years. She decided to kill him first. Upon hearing Ilya's command, the berserker leaped forward, his body creating a sonic boom, and suddenly appeared before Shirawi Minaya, swinging his axe at his head. This sudden attack caught everyone off guard. Just as Shirao was about to meet his end, a figure appeared before him in an instant. It was George. "Shirao, it seems your sister harbors a lot of resentment towards you. Did you do something unspeakable to her when you were little?" George's right hand was enveloped in a golden light spell. He caught the berserker's axe with just 2 fingers. Before the berserker could react, a powerful kick sent him flying back to his original position. "Mr. George, what are you saying? This is the first time we've met like this." Shirawi Minaya, startled, sat down on the ground, but still managed to retort to George. George smiled and helped him up. "Just kidding, don't take it so seriously, Master, I failed in my duty. Leave the rest to me." Drawing her invisible sword, Artoria walked up to George. Shirawi Minaya is Ilya's nominal older brother. She didn't expect Ilya to try to kill Shirao first, which is why she didn't react in time. Besides, Shirao is no longer a master, so even if it's because of the Holy Grail War, he shouldn't be the target of her attack. Chapter 619. It's Sandy, it's red bean paste. Who is this guy? He actually blocked Heracles' attack with his bare hands, and he's not even a heroic spirit. On the other side, Ilya was clearly stunned. The moment she saw him, she realized the swordsman's master was no longer Shirawi, but a complete stranger. This didn't bother her much. Her target today was Shirawi anyway. What she found unbelievable was that this stranger's reaction speed was even faster than a heroic spirit's, and he had blocked Heracles' attack with his bare hands. SHH, Ilya waved her hand, and Heracles attacked again. The swordsman's master was skilled, but Heracles was the son of Zeus in mythology, and he hadn't even used his full strength. She didn't think the powerful Heracles would lose. Besides, she herself possessed powerful magic and spells. Since these people were all like her father, wanting to protect Shirawi, she'd kill them all. The Holy Grail War was just that cruel. Facing the terrifying Hercules, Artoria, equally unwilling to be outdone, charged forward, blocking his massive axe with her invisible sword. Let's settle this one-on-one fairly. Alright, George didn't refuse Artoria's request for a fair duel like a knight's. Although he could instantly kill Hercules if he were to intervene, letting Artoria fight wouldn't be a waste of time. He could see what the Berserker's noble phantasm was capable of, and whether Artoria's Excalibur was as powerful as the legend suggested. Fighting here could easily harm innocents, so I'll find you a better place to fight. George didn't remain idle. He lightly tapped the ground with his right foot, instantly transforming the concrete into a reflective mirror. Then, everyone felt the world spin. The surrounding scenery changed abruptly. It wasn't that they were in another place, but rather that everything around them was reversed in their eyes. Even the words on the nearby graveyard were reversed. This is a mirror space. Even if you reduce the entire world and the entire city to ruins, it won't affect the real world outside. With another wave of his hand, a very comfortable sofa appeared in front of him, with 2 tables in front of it, laden with snacks such as sunflower seeds, peanuts, tea, and fruit. Come on, sit down. Standing is tiring. George plopped down on the sofa, beckoning to the stunned Rin-Tosika and her 2 companions, then said to Ilya, who was equally dumbfounded, "Hey kid, come on over. Those 2 probably won't settle things so quickly. Isn't this a bit inappropriate for us at this time?" After realizing what was happening, Shirawi scratched his head somewhat sheepishly. While Miss Artoria was fighting desperately against that ferocious monster on stage, they were sitting here drinking tea and eating. He felt a strange sense of guilt. "Sit down. You can't help with anything anyway." Rin-Tosika said something hurtful, then pressed Shirawi shoulder and made him sit on the sofa, before sitting down herself. However, the archers behind her vanished in a few leaps. She wasn't stupid. Although she had confidence in Artoria's strength and also recognized George's abilities, she still wanted to be safe and had the archers take advantageous positions beforehand. If Artoria was in danger, the archers could immediately provide ranged support, finishing off the opponent in a 2-on-1 fight. She wasn't a knight and didn't need to adhere to any chivalrous principles. On the other side, after failing to break the mirror space with several spells, Ilya also silently walked over and sat down. Her thinking was simple. If Hercules won, there was nothing to say. She would simply eliminate all these enemies. If Hercules lost, she was right next to the unfamiliar magician who had cast the spell and could intervene in time to control him and force him to open the mirror space to let her leave. So rather than waiting for the result from so far away, it was better to sit nearby and be ready to act at any moment. Actually, there was another reason. Although she had been tempted to kill because of the word sister, she had also been somewhat shaken. After calming down for a while, she no longer wanted to kill them all so quickly. He wanted to observe Shirawi up close, to see what kind of person this younger brother, whom their father had abandoned and raised, truly was. So, George, Rin-Tosika, Shirawi and Ilya sat in a row to watch the battle between Artoria and Hercules. The fight on the arena was incredibly intense. Artoria, thanks to George, had recovered to her peak strength, and Hercules, similarly, was at his peak due to the immense magical power within Ilya. In terms of physical strength alone, Artoria was no match for the demigod Hercules. However, Artoria possessed the ability to greatly enhance her body and weapons with magical power, along with exceptional intuition and top-tier swordsmanship. Therefore, even in a head-on clash, she was not at a disadvantage. The 2 exchanged blows, their swords and axes clashing countless times, creating deep craters and cracks in the ground. That's too agile. A berserker shouldn't be like this. Seeing Artoria use her superb swordsmanship to lure Heracles into an opening, preparing to decapitate him with a single blow, Heracles released his axe at the crucial moment and leaned back to dodge. Rintosika slammed her hand on the table and stood up in anger. Berserker-class servants experience a significant power boost due to their berserk state, but they also suffer from a fatal flaw: they lose most of their rationality. Therefore, their fighting style is usually extremely violent and direct, and many of their skills become unusable during berserk. However, Heracles on the arena, while violent and direct, fought with remarkable agility, not at all like someone who had lost their reason. Because he is the strongest servant. Even when corrupted by rage, he doesn't forget his fighting instincts. Ilya elegantly sipped her red tea, her face displaying the haughty expression of a proud young lady. She wouldn't be foolish enough to reveal her servant's name, allowing him to guess what kind of noble phantasm and abilities he possessed. This didn't stop her from flaunting the power of her heroic spirit, putting pressure on her opponent. No sooner had Ilya finished speaking than a change occurred on the arena. The Wind King's hammer, knowing that swordsmanship alone couldn't harm the berserker, Artoria activated another ability of her Wind King barrier. The Wind King barrier's main ability was to alter the refractive index of light by using wind wrapped around the sword, achieving invisibility. It was also known as the invisible sword. Faced with a weapon of unknown length and type, ordinary enemies had no idea how to defend themselves, and in their confusion, they would be beheaded. Only truly seasoned masters could use experience to judge and intercept. Although the berserker had lost his mind, his powerful instincts allowed him to accurately intercept her attacks every time. So he activated the Wind King barrier's second ability, transforming the wind enveloping the sword into a hammer as he thrust out his sword. Sure enough, this unexpected attack finally struck Heracles, sending him flying. It's over. Without the slightest carelessness, Artoria chased after Hercules as she knocked him away, slashing at his head with her sword. Chapter 620. How about we make a bet? We won. Shirawi-Midaya and Rintosika, who had been tense, jumped to their feet excitedly upon seeing this. George glanced at Ilya and noticed her face was full of mockery, showing no concern whatsoever. He knew that the berserker heroic spirit wouldn't be so easily defeated. Actually, it was quite normal. Ilya's berserker had fought so far relying solely on his powerful physique, without using any noble phantasms. How could he possibly die so easily? Every heroic spirit possesses a noble phantasm. Not using it simply meant it hadn't reached the point where it was absolutely necessary. He dodged it, but he's seriously injured. We've got this in the bag. Before Shirawi-Midaya and Rintosika could even celebrate, their eyes widened simultaneously. How could this be? At the critical moment, Hercules had forcefully twisted his body in midair, avoiding a fatal neck wound, but instead suffering a deep, bone-revealing gash on his chest. Such a severe injury would have left an ordinary person lying dead, and even a heroic spirit would experience a significant drop in strength. Yet, Artoria barely even seemed to be breathing. Therefore, the two believed the outcome was already decided, and even Artoria herself thought so. Unfortunately, despite such severe injuries, Hercules stood up as if nothing had happened, and the wound on his chest was healing at a visible speed. My berserker is immortal, so even if you all attack together, the final result will be death. Out of respect for the tea you offered me, I'll let you off this time. Ilya put down her teacup, still looking down on everyone, though her killing intent had subsided somewhat. In that case, how about we make a bet? George smiled at Ilya, who raised an eyebrow. What kind of bet? We'll bet on who wins in the end. If Artoria wins, you'll willingly transfer your command seals to me, making the berserker my servant. George raised his hand, and the teapot on the table automatically filled Ilya's cup with tea. However, this time Ilya didn't pick up the teacup. Instead, she turned and stared at George's face. You actually want my berserker? You already have a swordsman, isn't that too greedy? Besides, a master can only have one servant. I've never heard of a master obtaining two servants at the same time. That's for others. I have my own methods. I don't just want your berserker, I want the servants of the other 5 masters too. It's just that I don't like solving problems through violence. I hope to achieve my goal through a more peaceful transaction. This way, you won't have to lose your lives in the Holy Grail War anymore, which is a good thing overall, isn't it? George picked up his green tea and took a small sip. His nonchalant remarks not only surprised Ilya, but also greatly astonished Rintosika and Shirawi-Midaya beside him. They hadn't expected George to want to possess all the servants, using this method to seize victory in the Holy Grail War. You're quite the talker. Fine, have you considered what you'll do if you lose? Ilya dismissed George's words with disdain, but then her eyes widened, and she stood up abruptly. Because this was George's reply to her. If I lose, I can save your life when I remove the Holy Grail from your body and restore your body to normal, allowing you to continue living like a real human. Since Ilya is the vessel of the Holy Grail, the end of the Holy Grail War will also be her death. Moreover, according to his observation, even if Ilya has a way to preserve her life after separating from the Holy Grail, her body, which has been modified many times to serve as a vessel, cannot last more than a year. So no matter what, according to normal developments, Ilya is bound to die. However, this is not a big problem for him. Extracting Ilya's soul and creating a new body for her is a matter he can handle with a wave of his hand. What did you say? How do you know? Is what you said true? Several strands of silver hair fell from Ilya's head, first transforming into white storks, then into beams of light swords, pressed against George's forehead. You'd better tell the truth, or I'll kill you right now. Don't doubt it, I'm telling the truth. And if I'm not mistaken, this Holy Grail should be your heart. George pointed to Ilya's heart, simultaneously activating key source flow and devouring magic, causing all the lightsabers to transform back into silver hair and fall to the ground. Also, your magic won't work on me. Seeing her most powerful magic so easily broken, Ilya's pupils contracted sharply. Originally, she was sitting here to kidnap or kill the swordsman's master in case Hercules failed. Now it seemed she had walked into the lion's den, becoming the one being kidnapped. However, since this swordsman's master could see that her heart was the Holy Grail, perhaps he really did have a way to save her. So after some hesitation, she silently sat back down. Fine, then I'll take your gamble. Connecting her mind to her servant Heracles, Ilya commanded, go into full berserk mode. Receiving Ilya's command, Heracles roared, plunging into a state of extreme berserk rage, his magical energy turning crimson. In his full berserk state, Heracles experienced a dramatic increase in both strength and speed. Artoria was instantly in grave danger. In that case, I'll just have to finish you off. With her armor shattered and her waist wounded by Heracles, Artoria narrowly avoided another fatal attack, quickly creating distance. She decided to use her ultimate technique. Oath, Sword of Victory, raising her longsword, now golden, Artoria slashed down fiercely towards Heracles. Golden light instantly illuminated the night, and a gigantic holy sword, tens of kilometers long, formed in midair, also descending in a swift motion. Because Artoria was at her peak at this moment, and knowing that this was a mirror world and wouldn't affect reality, she unleashed her full power in this strike. Faced with such a terrifying holy sword, Hercules tried to dodge, but found there was nowhere to hide. Several kilometers in radius were within the sword's attack range. Boom! After a deafening roar, Hercules vanished into thin air, and the entire Fuyuki city was cleaved in two. That power is impressive, George nodded inwardly upon seeing the effect of Excalibur. To be honest, if his current strength hadn't been sufficient, and if the mirror world hadn't undergone multiple improvements, Artoria's strike would likely have shattered the entire mirror world. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 621 Infinite Ultimate Techniques. Don't be fooled by the fact that this sword strike merely cleaved a city in two, seemingly not particularly powerful. Physical destructive force is only one aspect. According to his observation, Excalibur also possesses strong light magic effects, making it extremely effective against dark creatures. Furthermore, this strike seems to contain a trace of a one-hit kill law. Sometimes, one cannot simply judge the strength of a technique by its surface destructive power. For example, a nuclear bomb can destroy a city but cannot kill Wolverine, but a killing curse can directly annihilate Wolverine's soul. So, which is more powerful, a nuclear bomb or a killing curse? For another example, if you were to use Irene's magic, Starfall, its destructive power would certainly be greater than that of Excalibur. However, if the opponent were Morgoth of Middle-earth, the effect would likely be less significant. But if you were to use Excalibur against Morgoth, its destructive power would be far greater than Starfall. How is this possible? However, just as Shirawi Midaya and Rin Tossical were celebrating Artoria's victory, Hercules, who had been utterly destroyed on the arena, miraculously revived. Ilya gave George a sweet smile. I told you, my berserker is immortal, and your swordsman's move seems to have exhausted all your magic power. It seems I won this bet. It's the 12 trials, an immortal noble phantasm that can transform the body into tenacious armor, immune to all physical and magical attacks below rank B. It can also revive 12 times after being killed, meaning that to kill the holder of the 12 trials, you must kill him 12 times in a row to completely kill him. If I'm not mistaken, he should be the demigod Hercules. Archer appeared behind Rin Tossica and explained. As a heroic spirit, one can generally guess the opponent's noble phantasm and identity as soon as they reveal their ultimate move. Originally, he was hiding in the shadows to provide support, but now, it seems that support is no longer necessary. If he only relied on archery-type noble phantasms, he wouldn't be able to break through Heracles' defenses. He was an archer, but the bow and arrow were just one of the noble phantasms he copied, not his true means of attack. So it was better to reveal what he knew. This is too monstrous. Hearing the archer's explanation, Rin Tossica and Shirawi couldn't help but twitch their lips. This berserker was already as strong as a monster, and now it took 12 consecutive attacks to kill him. It was simply a joke. A noble phantasm with a resurrection law. Not bad, quite worth studying. George showed no worry whatsoever, but rather an interested expression. He could also resurrect people, but mainly he used necromancy to summon the soul back through a medium in front of him and then reconstruct the body, which was different from the resurrection method of this noble phantasm. Moreover, it mainly affected others. If he could understand the law of this noble phantasm, then even if the physical body was completely destroyed, he could be instantly resurrected and restored, which would be very convenient in battle. Artoria, don't worry about your mana, keep going. With a snap of his fingers, George transferred some of his mana to Artoria through the connection between master and servant, instantly replenishing her mana. The stronger the master's mana, the stronger the servant can be. Simultaneously, the master can transfer their mana to the servant, allowing the servant to fight for longer. Artoria had used up 90% of her mana with a single attack, normally making a second attack impossible. But George's mana was hundreds of thousands of times greater than Artoria's, coupled with his abnormal magical regeneration, allowing Artoria to unleash her ultimate attack indefinitely, like a normal attack. Feeling her mana instantly replenished, Artoria was momentarily stunned. However, she quickly recovered and raised her longsword again towards the charging berserker. Oath Victory Sword, the holy sword, tens of kilometers long, descended once more, and Heracles vanished again. Let's see how many times you can replenish her magic, Ilya scoffed at the sight. It was clear that George had replenished Artoria's magic for her second holy sword strike, but the holy sword consumed a considerable amount of magic. Even a true god couldn't possess that much magic, couldn't possibly replenish Artoria's magic 11 times and unleash the holy sword 11 times. Continue. George ignored Ilya, instead watching as Hercules revived, replenishing Artoria's magic once more. I'm average in other aspects, but I have an extraordinary amount of magic. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, after George replenished Artoria's magic 10 times, and Artoria had struck Hercules 11 times. He turned and smiled at Ilya. Your berserker only has 1 life left. Do you still want to continue? Your magic power is so much. Ilya glared at George, then helplessly said to Heracles, come back. Heracles was not just her servant, but more like a father who had always protected her. She would not let Heracles truly perish. Although 11 of the 12 trials had been used, she could slowly replenish the number of resurrections with magic power later. As long as she wasn't completely killed, it would be fine. She had lost the bet, and even if she didn't admit it, she couldn't defeat him. If she didn't want to die here, handing Heracles over now was the best outcome. However, if she did that, as the representative of the Eansburn family, she would have completely lost. According to the rules, the head of the Eansburn family would close all the factories that manufactured homunculus humans, putting all the homunculus humans into deep sleep. She would quietly wait to dissipate into the Holy Grail. You've won. I'll give you Hercules' command spell, but I hope you'll treat him well, Mr. George, you said you'd grant me 1 wish. At this moment, Shirawi appeared before the two. Then could you please save Ilya? Ilya was his adoptive father's biological daughter, yet she was about to perish as the Holy Grail. How could he stand idly by? But he lacked the power to save Ilya and could only place his hopes on George. George had just said he could help Aaliyah remove the Holy Grail and allow her to live a normal life. And coincidentally, George had said he could grant him one wish. Since it's your wish, of course. Hearing Shirawi words, George nodded indifferently. For him, this was hardly a troublesome matter. Chapter 622 George, an ordinary person? You bastard, even so, I will never forgive you. You took my father away. Hearing that Shirawi actually wanted to save the man who wanted to kill her, Aaliyah's feelings were incredibly complex. She had thought Shira would be like his father, but after observing him closely, she realized he was the kind of fool who always put others first. Of course, she wouldn't admit that she had changed her opinion of Shirao. 10 years ago, a fire killed all my family. Kiritsugu rescued me from the ruins and raised me. He's a kind and righteous man. I believe he would never abandon you or not visit you without a reason. He must have his own reasons. I often see him sitting on the roof at night, looking northwest, weeping alone. Shirawi scratched his head and explained his thoughts. Ilya's expression froze upon hearing this, and 2 lines of tears involuntarily streamed down her face. Because northwest of Japan lies Germany, and the Eansburn family's territory is in Germany, the place she's lived since childhood. Father, why didn't you keep your promise? Why did you abandon me? Why don't you come with us first? We're going to see a master who survived the last holy war. Perhaps he can tell us something about your father. George waved his hand, leading everyone back to the real world. He was still researching the magic to control 7 command seals simultaneously, so he wasn't in a hurry to transfer them. He'd go find Kyra-Ekatamine, subdue him first, and then transfer the Lancer's command seals to himself once the research was complete. Controlling 7 command seals simultaneously wasn't difficult for him. If things went smoothly, he could probably finish the research by tomorrow. So he brought Aaliyah with him to avoid having to search for her again tomorrow. It would be troublesome if she were killed by another master in the meantime. He already knew 5 of the 7 masters. The swordsman's master is himself, the archer's is Rin Tosaka, the lancer's is Kyra-Ekatamine, the berserker's is Aaliyah, and the cavalry's is Sakura Matao, now transferred to Shinji Matao. After dealing with Kyra-Ekatamine, he will go to the Matao family. He doesn't know about the masters of the magician and assassin, but he believes Kyra-Ekatamine, as the supervisor, should know the information. Thus, 2 more people have been added to the group heading to the church in the suburbs. However, servants can transform from their physical form to their spirit form to hide. So, to normal people, it appears to be George, Shirawi, Rin Tosaka, and Aaliyah. This is it. He asked me to meet him tonight, so he shouldn't have left yet. In the suburbs of Fuyuki City, Rin Tosaka pointed to the very impressive-looking church ahead. George scanned it with his mind, a slight smile playing on his lips. He was certain that Kyra-Ekatamine was inside the church. Bang! The church door was kicked open by Rin Tosaka. Rin, I warned you repeatedly, but you ignored me. Kyra-Ekatamine placed the Bible on the church table and turned around. When he saw George, Shirawi, and Aaliyah, he raised an eyebrow. Looks like you've brought some strange guests, imitation priest. I'll just ask you one question. Did you kill my father? Rin Tosaka's right hand's magic crest lit up, ready to attack at any moment. Kyra-Ekatamine clearly hadn't expected that Rin Tosaka, whom he had originally groomed as a pawn, would learn the truth at this time. During the 4th Holy Grail War, because of Gilgamesh, he understood what he had wanted all his life, and thus killed Tokiyami Tosaka, his mentor. Love, family, friendship, justice, evil, these were not the path he sought. He wanted self-satisfaction and pleasure. His purpose in participating in the Holy Grail War wasn't to make a wish with the Holy Grail, but simply to let the curse of the black mud within the Holy Grail pollute the entire world, bringing suffering to all humanity. Because this would give him ultimate pleasure. He failed in the last Holy Grail War due to Kiritsugu Miya's obstruction. This time, after 10 years of meticulous planning, he was determined to succeed. Troublesome. They've already discovered the truth. I was thinking of telling you at the very end, so you could live a few more days. With a sigh, Kyra-Ekatamine's command seals lit up, but it's alright. You've become a master now. The plan was just moved up a few days. Perfect, the Holy Grail vessel is here too, dealing with it all at once will save us trouble. Rin Tosaka was someone he personally trained, he knew her abilities best and she posed no threat whatsoever. As for the archer Rin summoned, he had already sent a lancer to test her. Her strength was only average among servants, easily handled by the lancer. and it was he who sent the Lancer to test Rin's servant that night. So far, using his position as overseer, he had gathered information on masters of all classes except archers and sabers. Having Rin come to the church for the ritual was precisely to confirm the class and strength of the servant she summoned. However, Rin-Tosaka refused to come and insisted on summoning him himself. So, after learning that Rin had successfully summoned him, he sent Lancer to test the waters. Lancer returned and recounted the encounter. Just in case, he also sent Lancer to finish off the boy Rin had revived. However, Lancer hasn't returned yet. This wasn't a problem. A master could forcibly summon a servant from anywhere by consuming a command spell. Lancer dealt with Archer, and he dealt with Rin and the two ordinary people. Indeed, in his eyes, George and Shirawi Midai were just ordinary people. Shirawi Midai possessed some magical power, but such a low level of magical power didn't qualify him as a magus in the magical world. He remained an ordinary person. As for George, needless to say, he didn't sense any magical power at all. He was completely an ordinary person. He just didn't understand why Rin had brought two ordinary people with her. Did she think two ordinary people could help in the battle? That was too naive. The only slightly troublesome ones were Ilya, the vessel of the Holy Grail, and her servant, Heracles. He had gathered information on Ilya, Kiratsugui Minaya's daughter, who had undergone various modifications by the Eansburn family from a young age. Besides being a vessel for the Holy Grail, she possessed immense magical power, making her inherently difficult to deal with. Her summoned servant, Heracles, was the most powerful and invincible of all the heroic spirits, already ridiculously strong, and his noble phantasm granted him 12 lives. Fortunately, Gilgamesh had stated that he possessed a noble phantasm specifically designed to counter Heracles, easily resolving this problem. Chapter 623 Countless Treasures. Gilgamesh was a servant he transferred from Tokayami Tosaka during the Fourth Holy Grail War. Having undergone the baptism of the Holy Grail's black mud curse, he possessed a true physical body. He would not return to the land of heroes after the Holy Grail War ended. The two shared a common goal. He wanted to gratify himself by releasing the black mud from the Holy Grail, causing humanity to suffer, while Gilgamesh wanted to exterminate all of humanity by releasing the curse of the black mud from the Holy Grail. Gilgamesh believed that all of humanity was vile, and such vile humans had no reason to exist in the world. Therefore, Ilya and Heracles could be completely dealt with by Gilgamesh. What's going on? However, when the command spell on his right hand was activated, Kyra Ikadamin's expression changed, because he found that Lancer had not appeared before him as he had hoped. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation. Theoretically, unless Lancer was killed, the summoning could not fail. And if Lancer were killed, he, as the master, should have been able to sense it. Summoning your Lancer? He's already been dealt with, Rin-Tosaka sneered as she saw Kyra Ikadamin. Just now on the way, George had said he'd sealed the Lancer in a special space, and Kyra couldn't summon him back even with a command spell. Fine, this guy, he said to retreat immediately if he couldn't win. What a brainless idiot. Hearing Rin's words, Kyra sighed helplessly. He already had a guess in his mind. The Lancer had probably gone to deal with a witness, most likely the slightly magical boy in front of him, and encountered Rin and her archer. If it was just the archer, it wouldn't be a big problem. It was probably for some reason that Ilya had brought the berserkers to help. The Lancer, as a demigod, was quite strong, but facing both the archer and the berserkers simultaneously, he naturally had no hope of winning. Die, yin energy bullets. Rin-Tosaka stopped talking nonsense, raised her right hand, and fired red energy bullets at Kyra. Don't interfere, I'll kill him myself. As Rin-Tosaka's words fell, the red-clad Imaya transformed from his spirit form into his physical form, manifesting two short swords and charging towards Kyra Ikadamin. George nodded upon hearing this, smiling as he sat down on a pew in the church. Kyra Ikadamin couldn't be killed yet, because he still needed the information in Kyra's mind, and the command spells he needed to transfer regarding the Lancers. However, he could let Rin-Tosaka vent her anger now, even if she were truly killed. As long as the soul remained, he could bring her back. Ilya also didn't go to help. Her Hercules only had one life left, so she avoided fighting if possible. Besides, without a servant, Kyra Ikadamin definitely couldn't defeat Rin-Tosaka, who had won. Shirawi Midai wanted to help, but his abilities were limited. So they all sat down next to George, once again entering spectator mode. Before, They watched Artoria fight Hercules. Now they watched Rin Tosaka and the archer fight the imposter priest Kyra-Ikatamine. Rin, this level of magic is useless against me. Facing the combined attack of Rin Tosaka and the archer, Kyra-Ikatamine remained calm, swiftly deflecting the yin ki bullets with his black keys and then using his signature Bajikun to block the archer's attack. As the strongest master who nearly won the Fourth Holy War, besides his high intelligence, his strength was also top tier. From a young age, he learned the terrifying Chinese martial art Bajikun from his father. Possessing first-rate close combat skills, he could fight most servants without using their noble phantasms. Later, he was sent by the church to the Mages Association, becoming a disciple of Tokayami Tosaka, the fifth head of the Tosaka family and a high-ranking member of the Mages Association. He learned alchemy, spirit summoning, divination, and a whole host of other magics, making him a true all-rounder. Therefore, even facing Rin Tosaka and the archer alone, he wouldn't be easily defeated. So he's stalling for time, waiting for reinforcements. George, who was watching the battle, suddenly realized something. He wondered why Kyra-Ikatamine was constantly on the defensive instead of looking for an opportunity to attack. After all, if he could just find a chance to kill Rin, the archers might not bother him anymore. It turned out he was just stalling for time, waiting for reinforcements. He had already sensed 3 people entering the church, or more precisely, 2 heroic spirits and 1 human. One of the heroic spirits was particularly powerful, even stronger than the magical power of the berserker Hercules. He recognized the other heroic spirit and human. It was Shinji Matao and the cavalry Medusa he had seen at the Matao residence. Kyrie, it seems your plan has encountered a slight mishap. The church door was kicked open again, and a young man with blonde hair and an air of superiority walked in. When he looked at the row of seats behind George and Shiraui, his eyes lit up. Artoria Pendragon, it's been a long time. I didn't expect you to be summoned again. It seems this is fate. You are lucky to have the opportunity to be my queen again. Gilgamesh, what are you doing here? Artoria, transitioning from spirit to physical form, was filled with surprise upon seeing Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, like her, had been summoned during the Fourth Holy War, both as archers. But since archers weren't already available, Gilgamesh shouldn't have been summoned. Because I didn't go back like you. I also want to thank you for splitting the Holy Grail in 2, allowing me to obtain a true physical body and avoid returning to the land of heroes. Upon seeing Artoria, Gilgamesh no longer cared about Kyra-Ikatamine, who was still fighting. He wouldn't die anytime soon anyway. He wasn't truly in love with Artoria, but the dazzling Artoria was like a vast treasure in his eyes. His greatest hobby was collecting all sorts of treasures. A heroic spirit from the Fourth Holy War? I thought he was a magician or an assassin. Hearing Artoria and Gilgamesh's conversation, George's heart skipped a beat. What's this guy's noble phantasm? Being able to transcend the rules of the Holy Grail War meant this heroic spirit's strength was absolutely top tier, so he was naturally very interested in his noble phantasm. At this moment, Artoria's expression was also quite solemn. He collected almost all the noble phantasms from the Age of Gods, so his noble phantasms are countless. The most powerful one is called Ea, a noble phantasm capable of cleaving the entire world. Artoria quickly revealed what she knew about Gilgamesh. To be honest, even with George's magical power allowing her to unleash Excalibur infinitely, she wouldn't dare say she could defeat Gilgamesh. Chapter 624 I advise you to surrender. Once Gilgamesh unleashes Ea, only Apocalypse can block it. However, while Apocalypse can ignore any attack, it can only protect one person, others will still be affected. She felt that even if George was strong, he probably couldn't withstand Ea, which could slice through worlds. Countless noble phantasms, Ea that slices through worlds. After hearing the information about Gilgamesh, George wasn't afraid. Instead, his eyes lit up. This was exactly what he'd been looking for, finding it without even trying. He was thinking that the noble phantasms of the 7 heroic spirits weren't enough for him to study, and Gilgamesh could summon most of the noble phantasms from the Age of Gods. Among them were powerful noble phantasms capable of slicing through worlds. Even at his current full power, he couldn't slice through an entire world. Being able to slice through a world meant the power of this noble phantasm had reached the level of a single universe. However, he wasn't worried about being unable to block it. Because, as far as he knew, the power of a noble phantasm was related to the user's strength. Based on his current observations of Gilgamesh's strength, he was definitely incapable of unleashing an attack capable of cleaving the world. At most, He was only a few times stronger than Artoria's Excalibur. If he obtained it, with his magical power, he might be able to unleash the full power of Ea to slice through the entire world. Furthermore, Ea was ultimately an external force. Even if his judgment was wrong, and Gilgamesh could unleash Ea's full power, he could still interrupt Gilgamesh before he could even draw the sword. This was the difference in strength. External force was ultimately just external force, the user's own strength was paramount. He wouldn't use Ea as a weapon after obtaining it, his main purpose would be to study the underlying principles that allowed it to slice through the world. Once he mastered it, he could unleash attacks of similar power on his own. Moreover, only by understanding these principles could he use it not only in this world but also in other worlds. Meanwhile, seeing two heroic spirits suddenly arrive at a church, Rin-Tosika temporarily abandoned her attack on Kyra-Ekatamine and retreated with her archers to George's side. Kyra-Ekatamine also arrived beside Gilgamesh. However, upon seeing Artoria, his gaze shifted to Shiraui-Miaya. "I remember you. You're the child Kiritsugu-Miaya saved that day. So you're the seventh master. Good, very good." This feels like reuniting with an old friend. He and Gilgamesh had both witnessed Kiritsugu searching for someone in the ruins, though they hadn't immediately recognized him. Archer, swordsman, and berserker, 3 servants. The lancer probably couldn't retreat even if he wanted to. "Shinji, what are you doing here?" At this moment, Shiraui-Miaya ignored Kyra-Ekatamine, his gaze fixed entirely on Shinji Matao. Seeing his beloved Rin standing next to Shiraui-Miaya, Shinji Matao was filled with jealousy. He retorted disdainfully, "Even trash like you can become a master, let alone me." As the eldest son of a long-standing magical family, one of the 3 great families of the Matao clan, isn't it only natural that I become one of the masters of the Holy War? So you were the one who set up those soul-eating barriers at the school? Rin-Tosika glared at Shinji Matao, her face contorted with anger. In the past few days, students had been mysteriously disappearing from the school. Her investigation revealed that someone had set up soul-eating barriers within the school. These barriers could directly devour the souls of those who entered them. Generally, only heroic spirits needed souls to strengthen themselves. Therefore, she suspected there might be another master within the school. If it wasn't someone from the school, they could have easily set up soul-eating barriers outside. There was no need to place them inside. Now that Shinji Matao had jumped out, it was highly likely he was behind it. It was something only someone like him would do. Ha ha ha, of course it was my arrangement. Using the souls of those lowly commoners to strengthen my servants is their honor. Rin, don't be naive anymore, you have no chance of winning. If you surrender now, I will treat you well and make you my future wife. Otherwise, you will only serve me as a slave. The eldest son of one of the 3 great families is actually a piece of trash without magic circuits. I don't know what's so great about that. Looking at the arrogant Matao Shinji, George didn't hesitate to expose his true nature. "What did you say?" Matao Shinji was exposed and froze, then the veins on his face bulged. But George continued unconcernedly, "I saw you using the magic book in your hand to provide magic power to the servants. It seems that the real master is not you. You are just an imposter. A mere lowly piece of trash dares to say such things to me. Cavalry, kill him." Having his sore spot touched, Matao Shinji immediately ordered the cavalry Medusa to attack George. Despite her inward contempt for Shinji Matao, Medusa had no choice but to obey orders and launch the attack. However, before she could even take a step, Shinji's entire head exploded, and he fell to the ground. This immediately drew everyone's attention to George. Shiraui-Miaya and Rin-Tosika were incredulous, as George had always seemed gentle and kind from the start. They hadn't expected him to be so terrifying and ruthless when killing. Kyra-Ekamine's pupils constricted. He hadn't sensed any magical power from George, assuming he was just an ordinary person, but he turned out to be such a powerful magician. The fact that he hadn't even noticed Shinji's head exploding meant that the opponent's magical skill far surpassed his own. Finally, Gilgamesh showed interest. In that instant, he had sensed a powerful mental force erupting from George, and it was that mental force that had directly detonated Shinji's head. "I'm kind to normal people, but I show no mercy to scum." George slowly rose from his seat. "Let me introduce myself. I am George, Artoria's master. I hope you will surrender willingly and not resist, lest you end up like him." With a wave of his hand, the Lancer, who was sealed unconscious, was thrown out of the small world. "So it was you." Kyra-Ekatamine realized he had guessed wrong. The 7th master was not Shiraui-Miaya, but George, whom he had never heard of before. According to his personality, in a situation where he was unaware of the enemy's intelligence and in a passive position, he should have retreated decisively. But he knew that Gilgashmir would never agree to retreat in the face of such provocation. Chapter 625 The Empty Golden City. Sure enough, Gilgamesh's expression immediately changed upon hearing George's words. Surrender? It's been a long time since anyone has spoken to me like that. Very well, you've successfully caught my attention. I've decided to have some fun with you and your swordsman. Gilgamesh's modern-style jacket instantly transformed into gleaming golden armor. Paired with his golden hair, he exuded unparalleled opulence and nobility. Tisk tisk tisk, I love rich people the most. George lightly stomped his right foot on the ground. Mirror space. Most heroic spirits only have 2 or 3 noble phantasms, but Gilgamesh possessed a treasure trove of them. In his eyes, he was the richest heroic spirit. Robbing the rich was far more fun than robbing the poor. Boringly special magic. Let me show you what true power is, what a true king is. Gilgamesh didn't care about being transported to a different space. Even when he was taken into the reality marble world of the army of kings by Skander, the conqueror king, he could still shatter an army with a single sword strike. Besides, this is merely a mirror image of an inherent barrier, nothing special. Golden spatial ripples appeared behind Gilgamesh, from which emerged various weapons. Each weapon was extraordinary, a collection of noble phantasms with different abilities gathered during his reign. Born at the end of the Age of Gods, he possessed 2/3 divine blood and 1/3 human blood. He was a wedge created by the gods to control humanity. A child born of a goddess and a human emperor, destined to rule humanity, to rule all human heroes, thus achieving control over humankind. Therefore, he was also known as the King of Heroes. His greatest hobby was collecting all treasures, creating a vast treasury, the Golden City, which housed almost all the noble phantasms of that era. After becoming a heroic spirit, he gained the ability to connect to his treasury at any time and retrieve the noble phantasms within. However, as a king, he disliked close combat wielding noble phantasms, as it violated his royal dignity. More often, he would stand there, mocking his enemies while unleashing the various noble phantasms from his treasury like bullets. The powerful noble phantasm, launched as a one-time use projectile, naturally possessed considerable power while consuming relatively little magical energy. This combat method only consumed the magical energy needed to open the treasure vault connection. The attack relied entirely on the noble phantasm itself. This was why he was summoned as an archer. Come on, unleash your power. George stepped forward, arms outstretched, a broad smile on his face. Secretly, he had already opened the entrance to a small world before him. Meanwhile, Artoria behind George looked utterly frustrated. When Gilgamesh donned his golden armor, she drew Excalibur, preparing to fight him. However, George telepathically told her to stay put, that he would handle Gilgamesh. Although she was somewhat wary of Gilgamesh, as a righteous knight, as a servant summoned by her master, she should have been the first to charge into battle. Now, her master was telling her to stand back while he went to fight. Anyone who didn't know better would think she was the master, and George the summoned heroic spirit. Overestimating yourself, Gilgamesh waved his hand, and various noble phantasms, including swords, spears, and halberds, carrying immense energy, rained down on George like a hail of bullets. Ordinary enemies, even if they could withstand the first few attacks, would be riddled with bullets by the subsequent barrage. Even those with incredibly strong shields would eventually be shattered by the countless attacks. He had already summoned his golden throne and sat down, ready to enjoy watching George being riddled with bullets. But the next second, he stood up from the golden throne. How could this be? Because all the noble phantasms he had launched vanished into thin air within a meter of George. George, standing there, was completely unharmed. Space magic again. Upon closer inspection, he discovered an invisible spatial rift in front of George. It was that rift that had swallowed all the noble phantasms he had launched. George could transfer them to mirror space, indicating he was highly skilled in space magic. Using space magic to transfer attacking noble phantasms was indeed a very clever defensive method. HMPH, just a little trick. With a wave of his hand, the noble phantasms that were originally shooting straight ahead immediately changed direction in mid-air, shooting towards George from all directions. For him, changing the direction of the noble phantasms was simply a matter of consuming more magic power. Looks like you really have a lot of noble phantasms in your collection. Seeing that he had already absorbed hundreds of noble phantasms, yet Gilgamesh still had them shooting out continuously, George's smile widened. Get in there, he activated his mutant ability, and the noble phantasms that had changed trajectory immediately changed direction again before hitting him, and were once again absorbed into his small world. Unlike Excalibur and Utopia, the noble phantasms that Gilgamesh was currently shooting out, while not weak, were not yet at the level of Laws. Therefore, they were still affected by his ability. In addition, Gilgamesh did not consume much magic power to begin with, and he was just opening the treasure vault door to shoot out the noble phantasms, without much precise control. Insolence! How dare you manipulate my noble phantasm? Gilgamesh felt insulted and immediately flew into rage when he saw his noble phantasm, which he had fired, change direction due to some unknown magic used by George. He hated anyone touching his things, even his noble phantasms used to kill. Then let's see how many you can control. Dense spatial ripples instantly filled the sky, and countless noble phantasms rained down like a storm. He figured he could retrieve all his noble phantasms using the chains of heaven, and even if he ran out, he could replenish them immediately. He had no worries about running out. He believed that as a mage, opening special spaces and manipulating noble phantasms wouldn't be easy for his opponent. He thought that if his opponent got overwhelmed and made a mistake, he would be riddled with bullets. However, to his surprise, after firing for a full 10 minutes, his opponent remained completely unharmed, having absorbed all the noble phantasms into his special space. Even more unexpectedly, the noble phantasms he used for firing in the Golden City were gone. How could this be? Did the noble phantasm I fired not get retrieved by the chains of heaven? That's it? Then this battle should be over soon. Seeing that the opponent could no longer fire any more noble phantasms, George waved his hand and closed the entrance to the small world. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.